Pirates fishing Saitama Constitution Chapter 41-60. Chapter 41 Frozen Fallen. On the sea. A lifeboat is slowly approaching the island not far away. In the lifeboat that can accommodate 5 people, 2 soldiers are in charge of paddling, and the other 2 soldiers are standing behind Akainu with a solemn expression. About Admiral Akainu's behavior of disobeying the military order, who let this big guy be here with them. Compared with the kind Marshal Kuzan, this Akainu admiral is obviously more scary. On the other side, Kaido, who got the latest news from his subordinates, was originally going to Fishman Island, but he changed his route and came to Punk Hazard ahead of schedule. He was looking forward to the arrival of the Straw Hat Pirates. After all, it was Wong Luffy, a rookie who could crack Sengoku's golden body with one punch. This, Kaido laughed, grabbed the huge wine jar beside him, and drank to himself. Moments later, the lifeboat docked, and Akainu jumped into the deserted island, her empty sleeves fluttering with Marine's coat behind her. "You don't have to come up, wait for me here." After Akainu landed smoothly, he said to the hesitant soldiers behind him. After all, they are just ordinary soldiers, facing the strength of the Straw Hat Pirates, they do not have much effect. Saying that, Akainu headed towards the center of the island. The 2 old acquaintances are about to meet again. Akainu has a broken arm, can he still resist this monster? The other side. Chenmu sat cross-legged on the head of the black whale with a comfortable face, and behind him was the Sunny, which was being dragged by the chains. The little brother on the whale, "We have left the windless zone. You asked the whale to open its mouth. I want to say that the chain is retracted." Chenmu, who can sail freely on the sea without being troubled by seasickness, is in a very beautiful mood at this time. However, Frankie's voice was not suitable to come from below. The rare yaxing was swept away, Chenmu said in dissatisfaction, and patted the whale's head lightly, signaling it to open its mouth. Wow! A whale, Vivi opened its huge mouth, and the white waves poured into its mouth one after another. The iron ring that was originally fixed also slowly escaped from its mouth with the influx of the waves, and was slowly swept away by the mulberry. The small window below the knee number was closed. Chenmu also raised his eyebrows slightly. In this age of sailing by wind, the Marine's science department developed the wheel power. It is also very good for Frankie to have such an achievement. 2 years of study in the home laboratory of the greatest scientist, Vegapunk. Everyone in the Straw Hats has performed well in various fields, and it seems that they are developing towards a standard elite group. It smells like a red-haired pirate. Chenmu faintly issued, retracting Piaoyuan's thoughts. He stretched out his arms, took a deep breath, and fell down. Looking at the blue sky, white clouds, and falling snowflakes, the corner of Chen Emu's mouth unconsciously raised a happy arc. This kind of leisure time was not something he could live through in his previous life. After all, working as a worker is very busy. Chenmu put his left hand behind his head, and his right hand grabbed the slowly falling snowflakes. With a slight squeeze, it turned into gray dust and slowly drifted into the air. At the same time, a choking smell came over, which made Chenmu frown involuntarily. Although he hadn't seen snow a few times in his last life, he still knew one of the characteristics of snowflakes, which was tasteless. It was at this moment that everyone's slight coughs and Nami's shouts came from below. Everyone went to the room, and there was volcanic ash falling outside. Then came the orderly sound of footsteps. And Luffy also greeted Chenmu, who was drenched in ashes, but was politely rejected by Chenmu. What is volcanic ash? Can it be compared to seasickness? After saying that, he patted a whale lightly, and the black whale slowly began to sink into the sea. In the end, everything below Chen Emu's lips was submerged in the seawater. Inside the room, Nami, who was wearing a rainbow swimsuit, turned her back to the crowd and looked at the pointer on her left wrist that was shaking more and more quickly. "Hey Nami, what are you looking at?" It was at this moment that Luffy's neck stretched again and came over. The expression on Nami's face suddenly froze. She turned her head with difficulty, and looked at Luffy, whose eyes were glowing. In a heartbeat, it's over. Oh tilde tilde tilde, this needle is shaking so interestingly, it makes me smell adventure. After Luffy finished speaking with a smile, without giving Nami a chance to react, he retracted his neck, put his hands on his hips, and said to the curious crowd. Everyone, the route has been decided, get ready. After speaking, he rushed to the door, stretched his arms, grabbed the little lion in the distance, and then ejected the whole person, reaching his exclusive VIP seat. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark. Usopp was shocked. After passing the dazed crowd, he ran straight to Nami, and said with some worry, Nami, is it really okay? The choice of these 3 routes will affect life. Nami raised a helpless smile at the corner of her mouth and shook her head gently at Usopp. Seeing Usopp, Vivi sighed, accepting his fate, who made Luffy the captain. The volcanic ash falling outside stopped, and everyone walked out of the room one after another and came to the board. Luffy looked at everyone who walked out of the room, grinned, then turned around, put his right hand on his forehead, and looked into the distance, as if he couldn't wait to land on the island. Huh. Luffy whimpered lightly, stared at the wooden blocks floating on the sea, and noticed that on one of the wooden boards, light seemed to be constantly being refracted. Wow tilde tilde tilde. At this moment, Chenmu controlled the huge whale to slowly float up. When he appeared on the sea, he also found that strange board. That seems to be a figure. No, it's a figure frozen in ice. Chenmu stared at it for a while, and then he completely saw the situation on the wooden board. Hey, uncle, did you see it? Luffy's head stretched out from the side of the boat and looked at Chenmu, who was closer to the plank. Chenmu was stunned for a moment, then turned to look at Luffy, nodded lightly to him, and said, it's a person, frozen in ice. Ah, is it a distressed person? Uncle, quickly rescue him. Hearing that someone was killed, Chopper with a worried face hurried to Luffy, and then the nimble little body jumped onto Luffy's head, holding Luffy's straw hat tightly with both hands, eagerly facing Chenmu in the distance shouted. How many times have I said, don't call me uncle, I'm just a few years older than you. Chenmu's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help slandering. Although he was unhappy with his face written all over his face, Chen, who was still very honest, still chose to rely on it. Approaching the plank, Chenmu picked up the plank with one hand, raised the plank together, and shook it at Luffy and the others. Everyone looked at the raised plank. The thick piece of ice moved back and forth, and even nearly fell into the sea. After a while, a whale carried Chenmu to the side of the boat, and then his huge body emerged to the surface, and stopped when Chenmu was at the same height as the boat. Luffy jumped down from the bow, stretched out his hands, grabbed Ice Block, who was still steaming white, and dragged it back to his side. Behind him, Chopper hurried over, looked at the huge ice block in front of him, and couldn't help shouting. Doctor, where's the doctor? Then his face froze. Ah, that's me, he said, putting on a stethoscope with a serious face, and winking at everyone. Usopp and Brook were confused. Sanji silently flicked the cigarette and walked into the kitchen. Zoro, who understands it best, came out. Clang. With the word Hidao out of the sheath, he let go of his hand and threw it so that the back of the blade was down, and he swung it hard. Click, click. The sound of ice cracking sounded. The thick ice block quickly split at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the white figure was also successfully escaped, but temporarily lost consciousness. Chopper took a few steps forward and came to the comatose victim. The stethoscope was placed on his chest and stopped silently for a few seconds. Slowly heaving a sigh of relief, he said to the crowd, I just passed out, and there is no danger to my life. This scene made Chenmu a little familiar, and he was a little uncertain, and patted the mount under him. The figure of a whale was raised again. After reaching a certain height, Chenmu's eyes looked over the heads of everyone and saw the besieged in the center. This is Zephyr. Chen Mu's pupils shrank, first glanced uncertainly at the man's short purple hair, then moved his eyes and saw the sea-stone mechanical arm on his right arm, and then he was determined. This is Black-armed Zephyr. It's really a bad fate, you can meet them like this. Chen Mu looked at everyone with an indescribable weirdness in his eyes. Looking at the relieved crowd, the corners of Chen Mu's mouth twitched even more. It was at this moment that the chief financial officer, Nami, spoke. Won't pick up another troublesome guy, we're in short supply. Saying this, Nami subconsciously glanced outside the boat, only to find that Chen Mu had already disappeared, replaced by a huge black shadow that was invisible at a glance. Good guy, if I was on the boat just now, I'm afraid I won't be able to escape another blackmail. Hearing Nami's slightly disgusting tone, Chen Mu subconsciously covered the small treasury and hurriedly urged, a whale, to rise. At the same time, he patted his chest with lingering fears, and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Nami didn't see the person in her mind. She looked back a little boringly and looked at the unconscious old man who was being played with by everyone. His tilde. Robin retracted his jade finger like an electric shock, frowned and said, this man's right arm is made of sea stone. Everyone was stunned, and then locked their eyes on the huge mechanical stone arm. It's actually a powerful weapon made of sea stone. Nami looked at the robotic arm thoughtfully. Then his eyes lit up, and he said excitedly, it should be worth a lot of money. Hey, Nami, this is a patient. Usopp drooped his eyelids and whispered to Nami with a little disgust. When everyone turned back and looked at Nami, who had a proud face, and then at Usopp, who was squatting on the ground and drawing circles with his back to everyone. There was a steaming, big bag, on top of his head. Everyone's foreheads were covered with black lines, and they were speechless. Frankie carried Zephyr on his shoulders, followed Chopper's footsteps, and lifted it to the hospital bed, during which Luffy couldn't help being curious and touched the robotic arm twice. While sighing, so handsome, he fell to Usopp weakly. Hey, Luffy, that thing is specially designed to restrain the ability, you shouldn't touch it. Usopp said helplessly. Well, this kind of weapon should be specially designed to solve your abilities. Sanji lit a cigarette silently, and looked at Zephyr's eyes, which gradually became intriguing. Hey, Stinky Chef, you don't want to take him to order. Zoro noticed Sanji's abnormality and bumped down Sanji with his right elbow, saying with a weird smile on his face. Shut up, green algae head, the chef's knife will only swing at the food. Sanji replied. Oh, I'll just say it casually, why are you so excited? Zoro turned around indifferently, turned his back to Sanji, and whispered. I can hear it, Sanji gasped, glaring at Zoro's back. At this moment, Nami passed between the two and looked at Zephyr on the hospital bed with a little worry. He may be an enemy. In the new world, we can't be careless, and we have 4 more on board. A capable person. I always feel that it is too dangerous to keep him. Everyone was stunned for a moment, and after thinking for a while, Ming realized Nami's worries. This man is really dangerous. Just as everyone was thinking about whether to control it first, then find the nearest island to put it down and leave, Luffy spoke. Huh, where's Uncle? Why isn't Uncle here? Luffy looked around, but didn't notice Chen Mu. Nami looked at Luffy with some doubts. Everyone was in trouble for his personal safety, he was better and cared about others. After that, Nami was suddenly startled, her beautiful big eyes rolled in a circle, she seemed to think of something. She hurriedly ran outside, and shouted to Chen Mu who was in the high place. Uncle, come down quickly, we have things want to ask your opinion. Quote. Chen Mu, who was sitting idle, was stunned for a moment, looked down, and saw Nami who was waving at him, and the greatness of shaking under the rainbow bikini. Chen Mu's eyes narrowed, and after scanning it back and forth, he coughed a little maturely, and said, well, you go first, I'll come down. Then he secretly praised, it's big, then he put his hands up and jumped down. As soon as Nami walked up to the second floor, she heard the sound of heavy objects hitting the ground behind her and turned to look. I saw Chenmu half squatting on the ground, holding the familiar long knife in his left hand, and slowly stood up from the ground. Seeing Nami looking over, he gave him a very gentleman's smile. Nami turned her head in confusion, thinking, well, why isn't this uncle getting seasick again? Then she shook her head and walked in. Chenmu followed closely and walked into the health room on the second floor. When everyone saw Chen Musha walk in indifferently, a smile flashed on his face, and at the same time they also noticed the unsheathed, sharp blade in his hand. A look of surprise flashed in the eyes of several people on IQ Online, and then they lowered their heads and said for a while. The face looked thoughtful. Could it be that this uncle is planning to? Luffy spoke in time, interrupting the speculation of Robin and others. Uncle, what do you think of me keeping this old man as a partner? Luffy asked with a smile on his face. ... Everyone was speechless. This captain really can't tell the situation. Chenmu waved his right hand indifferently and said indifferently, no, you'd better not think about it. Pause, he added, I said it earlier, I'm just a few years older than you, don't call me uncle. Only a few years older than us. Everyone was stunned for a moment, then turned their heads and looked at Brook, who was counting with his fingers. He doesn't count, Chenmu said with a sullen face. Oh, everyone nodded, as if they didn't understand. Chenmu obviously gave up on changing their minds, not entangled in this nasty topic, and said to Nami, what's the matter with calling me down? I'll say it first, I don't think I have any money. Nami's beautiful eyes lit up first, then darkened, and said weakly, I just want to let you see, uncle, how dangerous this person is. If it's too dangerous, we plan to. Well, your plan is correct, throw him into the sea. After speaking, Chenmu glanced at Nami, who was graceful, and Robin, who was also tall. Walk outside the room. No way, this feeling of weakness makes him feel like a man's glory has passed away, and it's always uncomfortable. Ah, no, uncle, we didn't plan to throw him down. We just planned to tie him up first, then go to the nearest island, and then let him go. Feeling the strange eyes of everyone, Nami hurriedly explained. Huh, Chenmu turned around and stared at Nami suspiciously. Pause, he continued, why is it so troublesome, anyway, sooner or later, he will be attacked. This time it was everyone's turn to be stunned. What do you mean, sooner or later will also start with him? This old man, is it so dangerous? The talkative King Usopp played his role again and asked everyone's doubts. Uncle, why should we attack him? Is this old man strong enough to threaten you? Chenmu. Wait, why are you counting me in? He's just your disaster. Don't make a mistake, I didn't join the crew, I'm just a boat passenger who paid. Chenmu murmured in his heart, and thought again of the fear of being dominated by Nami. No, he can't threaten me, but it's okay to threaten you. Chenmu glanced at Zephyr on the hospital bed and said in a flat tone. Uncle, aren't we comrades? Nami looked at Chenmu pitifully, with crystal tears flashing in her eyes like autumn water, and she looked like she was about to cry, which made people feel particularly distressed. It also happened to touch the softness in Chenmu's heart. Hey, that's all, I can protect you once at a critical moment, but you still have to rely on yourself in the end, or you will fall into the hands of the enemy sooner or later. Zoro snorted lightly and turned his head. As a tough guy, he doesn't need to grow up under the care of others. Chenmu Vivi raised his eyebrows, glanced at Zoro and Sanji who didn't care, and then looked at Usopp and Chopper who were quietly relieved, only to find it funny. That uncle, do you know his identity? Nami blinked her big watery eyes and pointed at the humane on the hospital bed pitifully. Well, I know, Chenmu, Vivi Isho, nodded to Nami. Then is he really dangerous? Nami continued to be cute. Yeah, it's really dangerous. Chenmu continued to smile, his eyes occasionally glancing somewhere. Nami seemed to have noticed Chen Mu's eyes, and subconsciously straightened the proud mountain in front of her chest, and said, "The uncle must know his identity." Chen Mu's eyes narrowed, and he nodded stupidly. "Well, his name is Zephyr, and he is the teacher of Kizaru and others." Everyone's pupils shrank, and the entire health room fell silent in an instant. Chen Mu, who was stunned for a while, came to his senses. Looking away from Nami, looking at everyone with a frozen expression, he secretly said something bad and spoiled again. Chapter 42 Feed a Whale, Wake Up Spirit. Looking at the shocked crowd, Chen Mu sighed helplessly and said, "Don't worry, he has no real power now and can't mobilize the nearby marine troops. Neo-freshman marine even killed marine, so it shouldn't be marine." Chen Mu murmured with a guilty conscience. Looking at the crowd gradually returning to their senses, Chen Mu added, "Just like you, he is also a prisoner wanted by marine." Quote question mark question mark question mark. Everyone was stunned, their eyes full of doubts. Chen Mu glanced at everyone and sighed. "Anyway, it's all spoilers, so let's spoil it to the end." Chen Mu successfully fooled himself. His identity as a former admiral, Kisaru Akainu as his first student, and current Marshal Kuzan as his third. Because of something special, he withdrew from the Marine headquarters and set up a Marine unit by himself, codenamed Neo. Chen Mu paused, his eyes gradually narrowed when he looked at Zephyr, and he said solemnly, "The original intention of this unit was to annihilate all pirates in the world, regardless of good or evil." Everyone turned their heads in an instant, and their eyes hit the rough-looking old man in the seat, and a trace of fear flashed in their eyes. Absolute hatred for pirates, and at the same time, he has a strong strength. This person, as Uncle said, is too dangerous. At this time, Nami pulled away her shyness and looked at Zephyr with a tangled face, frowning and thinking hard. Then Chopper was afraid and couldn't bear it, so he asked Captain Luffy aloud. After thinking for a while, Luffy sighed and said, "What's the matter? Let me knock him away. My companion, I will protect it myself." Everyone's heart warmed, and there was a determination in their eyes when they looked at Luffy. "Well, since the captain has spoken, then we will leave him." Robin, the confidant elder sister, exuding a maternal brilliance, issued to everyone. "Well, I'll be responsible for sending him ashore," Zoro said coolly, and sat down against the wall. Although Luffy agreed to keep the man on board, the main combatants decided to stay and watch him just in case, just to be on the safe side. "Hey, then cure him, Chopper," Luffy said to the expectant Chopper. He Isho. "Thank you, Luffy." Chopper looked at Luffy with a moved face and nodded heavily. A cold, broken island is covered with frost. Wearing a white marine coat and a medal with a gold border and a blue background hanging on his left chest, Kuzan stood quietly at the highest point of this Iceland, watching the marine soldiers keep turning among the iceberg gravel find something important. A group of soldiers, wearing white marine cotton robes, but white marine cotton caps that cover their ears, and thick cotton gloves. The people endured the severe cold and kept searching for the supplies on the ice, which were the important armaments comparable to ancient weapons. Dyna rock. Because the characteristic of Dyna rock is that as long as it comes into contact with oxygen, it will explode violently, so Kuzan can only let his subordinates endure the severe cold and search for the dangerous goods that remained in the explosion. Kuzan frowned and closed his eyes. His body was covered with frost, and the ice below his knees turned into solid ice, and the white cold air was spreading from him to the ground. A long time, Kuzan opened his eyes, the ice fog in his eyes disappeared, he lifted his legs gently, cracked the ice block on his feet, and walked towards the warship on the ice. "Marshal." The soldiers put down their work, raised their chests, and saluted Kuzan who was passing by. Kuzan frowned slightly, he was a troublesome person, so he could only respond patiently. After reaching an open space, I looked left and right to confirm that no one was there. Quickly elementalized, the white cold air all over his body concentrated towards his feet, and then erupted suddenly, shooting him directly at the distant warship. After a while, Kuzan landed on the warship, and the chill all over his body subsided. Suddenly, countless light spots gathered around him, gradually condensing into a single figure. "Oh, it's so cold." Kizaru raised his eyebrows and looked at the broken island of iceberg with a teasing expression on his face. "Well, here you are," Kuzan replied lightly. "This situation, am I late?" "Well, old," he got away. Forced by this position, the word, teacher, came to his lips, but he could only choose to change his mouth. Kuzan sighed in his heart. "Really?" Kizaru put his hands in his pockets and glanced at Kuzan in front of him with a deep meaning. "Ha tilde tilde tilde." Kuzan let out a cold breath, turned around indifferently, and brushed past Kizaru. When he was about to walk to the side of the boat, he stopped and said without looking back, "The mission of garrisoning Mariajoy has been cancelled, and this, Dinah Rock, incident is up to you." And, remembering Kizaru's character, he pondered, "This is the task assigned by the five." Having said that, Kuzan took down the bicycle parked on the edge of the boat, and an ice ladder spread towards the sea. The corners of Kizaru's eyes twitched. Looking at the new marshal, he just rode his bicycle and left the warship without looking back, leaving this mess to himself. "It's really troublesome." Kizaru rubbed his temples with a headache. Sunny, in the health room. Zephyr's left finger Vivi trembled, and the whole person slowly woke up from the coma. Closing his eyes, Luffy suddenly raised his head, and the sharp light in his eyes disappeared in a flash. Chen Mu, who was sitting on the other side, moved his ears slightly, and heard a faint sound of sword groaning from outside the door. Vivi raised the corner of his mouth, and secretly said that his vigilance is still passable. On the hospital bed, Zephyr pushed himself very hard and sat up. Chopper jumped out of the swivel chair, held up the steaming medicinal soup next to him, and handed it to Zephyr. "This is the medicinal soup to drive away the cold, drink it quickly." The pale-faced Zephyr Vivi turned his head, looked at Chopper at the corner of the bed, and pulled out an ugly smile from the corner of his mouth. Thank you for saving me, doctor." After thanking him, he stretched out the left arm with the infusion tube inserted, and took Chopper's medicinal soup. He didn't care whether it was hot or not, he just raised his head and drank it. Hiccup tilde tilde tilde. Zephyr shuddered, and let out a very comfortable hic. Zephyr's complexion a little more rosy, Chopper breathed a sigh of relief. "Luffy, uncle, this thing in your hand is so handsome, I bought it." Hearing this, Zephyr was stunned for a moment, then smiled self-deprecatingly, shook his head and said, "I was cut off by some bastard pirate, and then installed by Marine's mad scientist. It's called a smashing prosthesis." Hearing this, Chen Mu Vivi was stunned. Whitebeard is still alive, has that titular son, Whitebeard too. Edward Wable still appeared. Unlike Chen Mu, who was lost in thought, Luffy and Chopper looked at Zephyr's right arm with bright eyes. Seeing Chopper's eyes glowing brightly, Zephyr chuckled and said, "I don't recommend you use something so heavy, Dr. Chopper." "It's amazing." Chopper didn't seem to hear it, and the light in his eyes grew brighter. Luffy glanced at Zephyr's robotic arm reluctantly, and looked away rather reluctantly, looking at Zephyr's wrinkled face. "Then, is the uncle Marine?" "No, I quit my job because of my age." Zephyr shook his head, then lowered his head with a desolate expression as if he was recalling something. Compared to Zephyr, who bowed his head in mourning, Chen Mu, who had withdrawn from his contemplation, was the back figure squatting silently in the corner and drawing circles, which was extremely desolate. "To actually call me an old man of this age an uncle, I'm only 26. Although everyone misunderstood him as an uncle, over time, Chen Mu got used to it. After a short period of sadness, Chen Mu cleared his mind. Silently stood up, looked directly at Zephyr's robotic arm, and familiar fragments flashed through his mind. Zephyr's timeline should be that he was attacked at the age of 65, and his students, except for Ain and Binz, were almost wiped out by Edward Wabel. Then at the age of 70, he assembled a robotic arm and set up a pirate guerrilla to start hunting pirates. That same year, Ain and Binz joined. But at this time Zephyr is still Marine. Chen Mu pondered carefully, connected all events in series, and fell into contemplation again. King Shichibukai. Chen Mu's eyes suddenly lit up, and he remembered this most important part. That's right. Zephyr quit Marine because Edward Wabel, who slaughtered his students, was recruited into Shichibukai. At this point, his goodwill towards Marine was completely dissipated, and he even hesitated to become an enemy of her. Chen Mu, who understood what was going on, nodded slowly, and looked at Zephyr with a hint of pity in his eyes. What a poor old man. Looking at Zephyr's wrinkled old face, Chen Mu was startled and his brows furrowed again. Always feel like I'm missing something important. Luffy glanced at Chen Mu, who was thinking to himself, and cast a questioning look at Zephyr, who started to move his body. What is the uncle going to do? Do you want us to put you down on the next island? Zephyr stretched out his left hand towards Luffy. There was a torn piece of white paper in the palm of his hand, which was shaking slightly. He smiled and said, "Don't be so troublesome, they should be looking for it soon." Luffy glanced slightly, hee isho, and said, "Okay then." Then he continued, "If the uncle is not Marine, it will be much better. After all, we are pirates and it will be very troublesome." Chen Mu, who had withdrawn from his meditation, rolled his eyes and was defeated by Luffy's IQ. Your provocation can be more obvious, or do it directly next time. Chen Mu's forehead is covered with black lines. ... Hearing this, Zephyr was stunned for a moment, then he clenched his teeth hard, squeezed out a stiff smile, and said, "Oh. Is it a pirate? Well, uncle, are you going to do something to us?" Luffy still looked at Zephyr with a smile on his face. Zephyr bowed his head slightly, making it impossible to see the expression on his face, and walked slowly towards Luffy with heavy steps. The rushing wind sounded, and the huge mechanical arm was wrapped in the strong wind and slammed into Luffy's smiling face. Luffy! Chopper couldn't help exclaiming when he saw Luffy being attacked. Looking at the giant fist that stopped at the tip of his nose, Luffy's pupils shrank, and he froze in place. Anyway, they saved you. It's inappropriate to act in such a hurry. Chen Mu raised his left arm slightly, and lightly clasped the steel round tube on the robotic arm, preventing it from advancing an inch. The Kyoka Suzuki Zanpakuto was held in his right hand by him. Seeing the bald man who suddenly appeared, Zephyr's eyes narrowed, and he was about to move his arm to throw the man away. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move the slightest, so he couldn't help but say angrily, "Bastard, who are you?" "Me." Chen Mu was taken aback. Suddenly I remembered that after leaving the Marine headquarters, he seemed to have become a blank identity. Thinking of this, Chen Mu couldn't help frowning and thinking. Seeing that Chen Mu was actually distracted during the battle, a trace of sarcasm flashed on Zephyr's face, and his extremely heavy right arm slammed down instantly. Then he suddenly pulled the mechanical arm back, and was about to rush towards Luffy. Wow! Suddenly, after the whole room shook violently, it tilted to one side, and various items were scattered all over the place. The sudden inclination made everyone unstable, and they all fell down. Outboard. As soon as everyone heard the sound of fighting, and before they could rush into check, they were thrown off balance by the sudden tilt of the sunny. Everyone was frightened, and hurriedly grabbed the guardrail or doorknob beside them. Of course, the one who only had time to grab the door handle was none other than Usopp, who had been eavesdropping outside the door. Usopp, stop screaming. Nami, who frowned, shouted to Usopp, the high-decibel noisemaker. At this time, a louder humming sound sounded, and everyone only felt that the eardrums were about to burst. The culprit who almost capsized the Sunny appeared in front of everyone. It's the black giant whale. Everyone didn't understand why the docile pet, a whale, suddenly became irritable. Could it be that something happened to the uncle? Everyone's heartbeat seemed to miss a beat, and they swallowed hard. Looking at the suddenly tempered pet, everyone was horrified and thought of some bad results. Uncle Chen lost. The two Suo-shan, who were the main fighting force, didn't think much about it. Their eyes were fixed slightly, ready to fight at any time. A whale, as innocent. It originally stayed beside the boat, quietly waiting for Chen Emu's return. But a wretched man who only wore underwear, said it blocked the sun. It had to blink its aggrieved eyes and slowly sink into the sea. Only a small piece of its back was exposed to the sea. Then, aggrieved, it slowly closed its eyes and planned to take a nap. Warship that was going fast, just ran straight over its back. And just right, this damn warship, the bottom of the ship is inlaid with a lot of sea stone. A whale was in pain and planned to overturn this abominable warship. But he was too large and accidentally injured the Sunny next to him. You know, in the setting of the pirate world, the Sea Kings hate sea stone very much, especially the marine warships, which are basically inlaid with a large number of sea stones. This is also one of the reasons why warships can pass smoothly from the windlass belt. Returning to normal, the line of sight returned to the sea again. Looking down from a height, I saw a huge black figure floating from the sea, with a small pirate ship on its wide back, slowly sliding towards the blue sea from the side. On the other side of this huge black shadow, there is also a ship, which is slowly sliding down its scaleless back. The people on the two ships lost their balance and fell. There were even a few reckless marines who didn't have time to grab the edge of the boat and fell into the sea. The humming of the giant whale continued to spread, causing ripples on the calm sea. The two ships slid down at the same time, and were pushed into the distance by the rippling waves. After a long time, the sound of whale calls slowly fell. On the calm sea, a giant whale straddled between the two boats. A whale stared with big eyes and glanced at the warship in the distance. He was full of anger and slowly sank into the sea. It's still docile. On the other side of the warship, the girl with long blue hair was also stunned, looking at this sea king in shock. Why is it that we are about to crash into this pirate ship? Could it be this is a pet kept by these pirates? At this moment, a broad palm gently rested on her shoulder. Mr. Binns, who was dressed in a ninja costume, shook his head gently and said in a calm tone, "Go ahead first, teacher should be in a hurry." Immediately, the Neo-Marine unit slowly turned the hull, aimed the huge axe blade hanging on the bow at the Sunny, and drove straight ahead. After that, there are several warships, slowly starting to surround from both sides. Chapter 43 Nami's Hug. Calm sea. The warship with a huge axe blade in the bow rammed towards the Sunny. On the surrounding sea, there were also 5 ordinary warships, like a school of free fish, surrounding the Sunny and the main ship of the New Marine in the middle. The Sunny gradually stabilized, and everyone slowly got up from the ground. Nami grabbed the white guardrail on the second floor and shook her head gently to drive away the dizziness in her mind. At this time, she saw a dazzling white light reflected on the sea in the distance. He immediately raised his hand, covered his eyes, and looked away through his fingers. Nami's pupils shrank first, then her eyes widened suddenly, and she shouted to everyone who just got up, "Everyone is ready, there is Marine." Afterwards, he said eagerly to Frankie who was looking at him, "Frankie, hurry up, the left rudder is fully charged, and avoid the collision of the Marine main ship." "Relax, Nami-chan, my super. Sunny is very strong." Frankie grinned Isho, bared his white teeth at Nami, and made an "okay" gesture by the way. "Yo-ho-ho-ho-ho, Frankie-san is really reassuring." Brooke, who was on the side, also came over with a smile on his face, and patted Frankie on the shoulder. The veins on Nami's raised fist jumped, and she angrily said to the blindly confident two, "Their bow is a giant axe." Quote question mark question mark question mark. The smile on Frankie's face faded instantly, and he walked to the side of the ship with a dignified expression, and looked at the rapidly approaching warship. Then his pupils also shrank, and after a brief period of daze, he hurried with his legs, quickly ran up to the bow of the boat, and slammed with both hands, tightly controlling the steering wheel to the left. Nami, who was on the second floor, quickly glanced around and saw the shadows of several black ships wandering in the distance. She said with a serious face, "No, we are surrounded by warships, everyone is ready to fight." With a boom, the door of the health room blew open, turning into countless sharp wooden blocks, lashing towards the nearest Nami. "Be careful," Robin exclaimed at the entrance to the stairs on the left. "At the same time, quickly cross your hands in front of your chest." Second round flowers bloom. Robin's coquettish shout sounded again. Still in shock Nami, she was quickly pushed down by two tender white arms from her shoulders, dodging the sharp wooden blocks shot from the front. "Thank you, Robin." Robin nodded lightly in response, then turned his head and looked at the health room with a solemn expression. "Ah! Pain!" Luffy flew out of the room, smashed the white guardrail on the second floor, and fell onto the lawn on the deck. "It's okay, Luffy." Robin grabbed the guardrail with both hands and looked at Luffy nervously. "It hurts." Luffy fell to the ground, rubbing his red face, and waved to Robin on the second floor. Zoro's face sank. He took out the words Hidai from his waist, and rushed into the room first. Sanji, whose face was slightly cold, followed closely behind. Clang, 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 there was a sound of gold and stone crashing from the room. Occasionally, Sanji's anger could be heard. Luffy, who was relieved, also jumped up and joined the battle. On the sea, the Sunny began to flee to the left, followed by the huge warship behind her. The distance between the two ships is rapidly closing. "No, it can't be avoided, everyone is ready to fight." Nami frowned, waving at everyone below. On the huge warship, the huge axe blade flashing with cold light is pressing step by step, and it is only a few meters away from the stern of the Sunny. "Frankie, think of a way." Usopp looked at the huge warship that blocked the sun, and shouted eagerly. "No, it's too late." Frankie was also in a cold sweat. Just as the huge axe blade approached, about to kiss the mainsail with the picture of the Straw Hat Pirates. Just at this juncture, a yellow figure shot from the second floor, hurried along the main mast, and headed straight for the watchtower at the top. Everyone only felt a flower in front of them, like a golden streamer, flashing past. In less than a second, the figure in yellow appeared on the watchtower at the top of the mast. Chenmu's extreme speed exceeded the speed of sound. When everyone saw Chenmu appearing at the top of the watchtower, they heard the belated sound of a sonic boom. With a sound of clang, the sharp blade collided and sparks flew. Beneath the huge axe blade, Chenmu held Jinghua Shuiyu with his left hand, and the ledge was in front of him, blocking it abruptly. The three main forces rushed out of the room and stopped firmly on the white guardrail on the second floor. Luffy squatted on the white guardrail, raised his head, grabbed the guardrail below with his left hand, placed his right hand in front of his forehead, and looked at Chenmu, who was above. A glint of light flashed in his eyes. And Zoro stood on both sides of Luffy with expressionless faces. One put the knife into the sheath, the other Vivi lowered his head and lit a cigarette with a click. Everyone in the field raised their heads and looked at the resolute figure on the watchtower. The man's white cloak sounded in his ears, and the sea breeze blew, hunting. With tears in her eyes, Nami looked at Chenmu's figure, and finally repeated the words, "Saved." On the bow, Usopp and Frankie turned their heads and looked at Chenmu in horror. No, it should be said that he was looking at the figure on his right hand. It's the source of the disaster here, the black arm Zephyr. However, Zephyr's eyes were closed at this time, the old face with ravines and ravines no longer had a trace of fierceness, and the whole person fell into a coma. Chen Mu Vivi raised his head, glanced at the thick long axe tip that was rubbed against his scalp, opened his lips lightly, and spat out a word. Bump. Everyone was stunned, not understanding why the uncle above his head said such a strange word at this time. But the next moment, everyone understood. Accompanied by a low cry of a giant whale, a huge black figure surfaced and flew directly out of the top of the huge warship. Everyone watched the huge warship like a parabola, smashing on the distant sea, causing a wave of dozens of meters high. Secretly shocked, it turns out that this little guy is so powerful. There was a loud noise in the ears, which woke everyone up. Looking at the monstrous waves that blocked the sun, everyone's mind went blank. If this big wave hits, the Sunny will sink. Chen Mu looked at the huge wall of waves that slapped, and Vivi twitched at the corners of his mouth, and said in his heart, "This stupid whale." Chen Mu released his right hand, allowing Zephyr to fall in a free fall, with his left hand holding the knife stretched forward. Then, a long inhalation sounded, Chen Mu's cheeks blushed, and the side of his face was even more rounded. Woo! A violent wind sounded. Standing on the roof of the boat, Chen Mu forced the wall of nearly 50 meters high waves to blow into all directions with one breath. Get it done. The corners of Chen Mu's mouth twitched slightly, and he jumped off the watchtower with a chuckle. Everyone looked at this figure like a divine soldier descending from the sky, and for a while, they were a little crazy. After a while, Nami was the first to come back to her senses, and with tears in her eyes, she rushed towards Chen Mu's arms. Uncle bastard, Nami sobbed softly. Chen Mu was stunned for a moment, his hands were in the air, and he didn't know what to do. At this time, Sanji was smoking a cigarette with a depressed face, and a light called envy, jealousy and hatred flashed in his eyes. After sobbing lightly for a moment, Nami seemed to sense something was wrong, her pretty face flushed, and she hurriedly released the white tender arm that was wrapping around Chen Mu's neck, and took a step back. Chen Mu raised his brows lightly, looking at Nami with a shy face, only to feel beautiful. Cough cough. Zephyr, who was lying on the ground, coughed violently, and his face became very ugly. I saw his mouth slightly open, as if he wanted to let in more air. Chopper hurriedly ran over to check it out. After examining it carefully, he turned his head eagerly. He has severe asthma. Everyone pursed their lips and didn't answer, but the flashes in their eyes showed a trace of unbearable. Are they still so soft-hearted? Chen Mu noticed the expressions of everyone and sighed in his heart. Everyone, looking at the unresponsive crowd, Chopper's eyes began to burst into tears. Chen Mu shook his head, walked to Chopper's side, hooked his right foot lightly, carried the thrown Zephyr on his shoulders, and walked towards the stairs leading to the second floor. When he was about to step up the stairs, he paused, looked at the people behind him, and said, "I'll come and see him this time." Chopper on the other side, he gently whispered Isho and said, "There is a patient in need of treatment, isn't Dr. Chopper going to come over?" Chopper was stunned for a moment, then made a heavy, and followed behind Chen Mu with a smile on his face. The atmosphere is a little depressing. As the captain, Luffy giggled Isho to the crowd and said, "I believe in Uncle." Everyone looked sideways, looked at Luffy who was smiling, chuckled lightly, and slowly loosened his frown. Zoro glanced at everyone and said, "If that's the case, leave the rest of the marine to me." After he finished speaking, he pulled out the words Hidayi and bit them tightly in his mouth. Chushui and the third generation Gush also both came out of their sheaths. At this moment, Sanji jumped up, stood on the bow with Zoro, looked at the surrounding warships, and said lightly, "You can't take the limelight all by yourself." After he finished speaking, he flicked out a cigarette that had been lit at an unknown time. "Am I right, Chlorella?" Sanji's eyes flashed a funny look, and he looked at Zoro with a teasing expression on his face. "What did you say, stinky cook?" Zoro gritted his teeth. Why, are you going to fight? I'm just in a bad mood right now. Sanji also looked like he was gnashing his teeth. Looking at the two with hideous expressions, Usopp sighed helplessly and closed his eyes. At this moment, Luffy jumped up, put his hands on the shoulders of the two of them, pressed their foreheads together, and separated them like a bull fighting horns. Looking at the duo with puzzled faces, Luffy hee isho and said, "The limelight this time belongs to me." Chapter 44 Akainu vs Kaido. On the other side, Akainu and Kaido finally meet. Damn, why is this bastard here? Looking at the burly man with two horns on his head, Akainu's mood suddenly sank. Tun 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 tun. Kaido leaned on a boulder halfway, raised the huge wine jar with his muscular, horned right arm, kept pouring fine wine into his mouth, and the aroma of the wine was overflowing. In this way, the top leaders of the two major forces met. After a long time, the last drop of wine slid down the edge of the vat and fell into Kaido's mouth. Kaido's right arm, which grabbed the wine vat, lifted it vigorously, causing a low whistling sound. After being silent for a few seconds, it seemed that there was really no more wine. This time, he smacked his mouth twice, and threw the wine jar back, looking at Akainu not far away. Hiccup. Marine Admiral over there, do you have any wine? Kaido, who was full of alcohol, opened his eyes slightly and waved at Akainu. HMPH. Akainu grunted heavily, not answering him. Kaido slapped his mouth again, slowly propped up his upper body with both hands, and sat cross-legged with his legs crossed. I haven't played in a long time. Akainu was also unequivocal. His body exploded with momentum, billowing black smoke billowed from his left fist clenched, and lava with intense high temperature slowly dripped to the ground, making a sound of chi-chi. Hiccup. You don't seem to be able to beat me now. Kaido tilted his head and looked at Akainu's empty sleeves. Well, one hand is enough. Saying that, Akainu's eyes narrowed, and he swung his left fist forward, facing Kaido, who was full of ridicule, and suddenly rushed. At the same time, billowing smoke rose from everywhere on him, and the elemental state was turned on. Looking at Akainu walking in front of him, the contempt in Kaido's eyes became even stronger, and he pulled his right hand behind him, and a huge mace appeared in front of him in an instant, smashing it hard at the rushing in. Thundering. Gossip. Looking at the lightning mace so close at hand, Akainu's brows sank, and his left fist turned into a smash, which was more than enough for this disfiguring blow. Kaido raised his eyebrows, and there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. This guy Akainu, with a broken arm, did not expect to have such a keen fighting ability. At the same time Kaido was surprised, his fighting spirit rose again. Hey, interesting, Kaido chuckled. At Akainu who was almost crawling, Kaido subconsciously raised his foot. Dark Hound, Earth Flame. Akainu let out a low drink, causing Kaido Vivi who was about to settle down for a moment. It was at this stunned time that the lava on Akainu's left arm stopped flowing. The ground began to become hot, the ground gradually turned red, and then red cracks appeared, with scorching heat, spreading around. After being stunned for a while, Kaido's eyes lit up again with amazing fighting intent, his aura instantly soared, and the violent aura spread around, and with it, he blew out the hot tongue of fire that squeezed out of the cracks in the ground for a moment. Boom. The raised right foot slammed down and stomped heavily on Akainu's back, but it was the sound of stepping on the ground. Kaido's eyes narrowed and he stared. The thick black smoke spreads out, and the flames and lava are constantly burning his boots, and the figure of Akainu is no longer unknown. Kaido, who felt that he was being played, only felt a suffocation in his chest. He couldn't help but raised his head and roared. The whole person rushed into the air in an instant and turned into a dragon. Akainu. A roar with endless anger resounded throughout the island. Akainu, who had dived into the magma underground, slowly appeared behind a giant tree. Big breath, fire. After 2 years, Akainu used this trick again. However, this time, only the left arm can be used for him. Akainu couldn't help but think of the strange scene that happened in the cabin 2 years ago, and remembered the unpredictable blow of the Straw Hat Boy. Sooner or later, I'll make you pay back 100-fold, Straw Hat Boy. Akainu gritted his teeth bitterly. Thoughts. Akainu stared at the huge dragon shadow in the sky, and the power of lava accumulated on his left arm had reached its peak. The giant lava fist, almost the size of half a dragon, charged towards Kaido in midair with a frenzy aura. Huh. The furious Kaido felt something in his heart. The huge dragon head looked down, and his pupils shrank suddenly as he looked at the rapidly approaching lava giant fist. Kaido, who was experienced in combat, subconsciously exhaled a more scorching dragon breath. The violent wind howled, and 2 extremely high-temperature attacks collided. Boom tilde tilde tilde. The collision of the 2 violent attacks only maintained a second of calm. Then came the deafening roar, and the monstrous flames that covered the entire island. On the sea, waves of ripples spread, pushing the lifeboats docked on the side of the island to the far sea. The eyes of the 4 marine soldiers were wide open, unable to return to their senses for a long time. The other side of the island. On a pirate ship that was gradually moving away, a man with double horns and mist all over his body looked at this Fire Island, with a face full of resentment. Damn, it's time to find a new lab. In the sea at this time, the pirates heading towards the safe island, going, and under the reminder of their own navigators, changed their course one after another, and moved towards another island, going, where the pointer's shaking was not particularly violent. As for why Punk Hassad, who was originally recommended by the safety pointer, suddenly became dangerous, the pirates didn't think much about it. The new world is so dangerous. On the other hand, Luffy Zoro Sanji also successfully fought with Neo Marines. It's just that Zoro was the one who forced the warship to stop this time, and he also took advantage of the situation to split the huge axe into 2 pieces. Wearing a blue cape and short hot pants, Miss Ain jumped down first. Seeing this, Sanji's heart beat faster. Return the teacher, or you will face a salvo of artillery fire from all the warships. Ain's eyes flickered with cold light, and he stared at everyone on the sunny with hatred on his face. Leave the swordsman to me. Zoro put the knife in front of Sanji and walked towards Ain with a calm expression. Ha tilde tilde tilde. A slight wind sounded, and Mr. Binns, who was dressed in a black-bottomed ninja suit and had a yellow cloud pattern all over his body, instantly appeared behind Ain and stood quietly on the edge of Sunny's white boat. Damn, then leave this strange man in disguise. Sanji glanced at the tall and slender Miss Ain reluctantly, then withdrew his gaze angrily, and stared at Mr. Binns in the ninja costume. Binns. At this moment, Luffy's laughter sounded, and Zoro Sanji turned to look. Yeah, second gear. Luffy lowered his head and drank lightly, his skin instantly turned red, and bursts of white steam rose from his skin. Then he looked up, facing Zoro Sanji Isho, his lips parted again. Rubber jet, pistol. Speaking, Luffy's figure appeared directly on the upper right of Ain. The left palm spread out and stretched forward, and the right fist that had been gaining momentum for a long time slammed into the past. Ain looked back, only to hear a boo sound, a slight sonic boom, and then, what he saw was a big hole that the green vine was blasted out. Thank you, Mr. Binns. Ain said without looking back. You're welcome. As Binns's voice fell, Luffy flickered back to Zoro and Sanji's side. Hey, Luffy, leave the swordsman to me. Zoro protested indignantly. He. Luffy was still smiling, ignoring Zoro who was full of resentment. Sanji didn't participate in the boring conversation between the two, his eyes were slightly calm, and he stared solemnly at the weird ninja with a long green sword on his back. That guy is fast, leave it to me. After saying that, Sanji rushed out, leaving Luffy and Zoro with a dazed face. Crowded. Bins, with a mustache on his face, snorted softly. I saw several thick green vines growing on the green grass in an instant, entwining towards Sanji, who was rushing fast. Sanji paused, looking at his feet in shock, seeing the thick vines that had clinging to his thighs. Clang! The cold sword light flashed, and the vines on Sanji's body were instantly cut into several pieces and fell down. Don't thank me, stinky cook. Zoro waved the ghost in his hand casually and said indifferently. This green algae bastard. Sanji's forehead jumped wildly, but he couldn't refute it. He could only grit his teeth and look at Bins angrily. Bins raised his eyebrows and let out a small murmur, and there was a hint of surprise in Zoro's eyes. He is a prosperous fruit person who can control nearby plants and speed up the growth of plants, but when he encounters an enemy who uses a sharp blade, he will become very tasteless. Just when Bins was distressed, Ain said in a timely manner, Mr. Bins, go to the other party's eyebrow curling, the swordsman will be handed over to me. After saying that, Ain crossed his arms, put his two blades on his chest, and charged towards Zoro. Curly eyebrows. Sanji suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of frustration in his heart. And Zoro laughed heartlessly. Luffy looked left and right at the two of them, and then looked at the warship behind Bins. After confirming that there was no third enemy, Luffy pouted, jumped to the guardrail on the second floor, and looked at the four who were about to fight. Clang, clang, clang. There was a sound of sharp blades crashing, and Zoro only used the one-knife flow, Chu Shui to face Ain. On the other hand, Sanji, who was worried about being bound by the vines, used aerial walk, and ran towards Bins from the air. Main force of the Straw Hat Pirates and the new Marine Generals of Neo is in full swing. In the health room, Chenmu shook his shoulders gently and threw Zephyr onto the hospital bed. Chopper climbed into the swivel chair with a worried look, and prepared the medicine on the table full of medicines. Chenmu glanced at the pitch-black pothole beside the hospital bed, and said to Chopper beside him. Chopper. Huh. Chopper replied without raising his head, his hands still fiddling between the medicines, and he muttered, the medicines for asthma have not been prepared yet. Don't care, let's try it first. Chenmu's eyes twitched, and he swallowed the words he was about to say. At the same time, he looked at Zephyr on the hospital bed with some pity. Chapter 45 The Evil Blackbeard Pirates Part 1. Time passed quietly. The sound of fighting outside the room gradually ceased. Chenmu, who was resting against the wall, slowly opened his eyes, frowned slightly, and couldn't help but complain. It took so long. Just when Chenmu shook his head in disappointment, a soft sound came from his ear. Chenmu turned his head and watched as a burst of green smoke slowly dissipated in the air. The corner of his mouth couldn't help twitching. Chopper on the swivel chair, with a shining light in his eyes, gently shook the test tube containing the green medicinal liquid, looking eager to try. Accompanied by a puff footsteps, Chopper came to Zephyr's bedside, raised his head, and blinked his big black eyes at Chenmu, who was standing beside him. Chenmu looked down at each other and understood what it meant. Knife to his right hand, he grabbed Chopper's collar with his left hand, lifted Chopper directly, and placed it beside Zephyr's pillow. Watching Chopper pinching Zephyr's nose and slowly pouring the green potion into his mouth, he couldn't help but hold a moment of silence for the elderly uncle. On the other side, the 5 people who ended the fight were separated from each other. Ain was panting slightly, and beads of sweat kept dripping from his fair and pretty cheeks. Mr. Bins in ninja attire, his chest heaving rapidly, holding a long green-handled sword horizontally, blocking Ain's face, looking at Sanji, a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. He. Luffy's laughter broke the solemn atmosphere. Zoro frowned slightly, Vivi tilted his head, looking at the smile on Luffy's face, a bad premonition flashed in his heart. Sanji also looked sideways slightly, and also panicked in his heart. Luffy glanced at Sanji and Zoro, who were 12 years younger, and Luffy's eyes lit up, looking eager to try. I'm a rubber man, I don't know if your abilities will work for me. I really want to give it a try. Zoro Sanji covered his face and sighed, with an expression of, I knew it was so. The average IQ of our entire pirate group was lowered by him. Ain's frowning eyebrows suddenly loosened, and with a look of caring for the mentally retarded, he looked at Luffy, thinking. Is there something wrong with this pirate's brain? Zoro Sanji covered his eyes and sighed, with a, knowing. At this moment, the smile on Luffy's face faded, and the expression on his face instantly became serious. You've turned my companion into this. As a captain, I'm very distressed. As soon as the voice fell, his eyes suddenly twitched, and a burst of transparent fluctuation swayed like water waves, quickly passing over the two people on the opposite side. Conqueror Haki. Ain and Binz froze, and an indescribable pressure instantly appeared on the two of them, as if they were shouldering a giant mountain. After a brief struggle, the two still couldn't carry Luffy's Conqueror, and both fell down. There was a burst of pink light on the bodies of Suo-chan and the others. Then the two slowly began to grow taller and stronger, and supported the wide clothes again. Luffy jumped down from the second floor and fell between the two of them. He clapped both hands on their shoulders and said, Long time no see, Zoro, Sanji, hee. The two first glanced at the laughing Luffy, then turned to look at each other, and there was a hint of disgust in their eyes. Useless stinky swordsman, color cook. At this moment, the distant warship slowly surrounded Luffy and the others. The dark muzzles were aimed at the Sunny in the center. The atmosphere suddenly sank. At this moment, the sound of breaking the air sounded. A burly figure rushed out of the second floor of the Sunny and flew obliquely towards the warship in the distance. The three of Luffy were startled, and stared at the figure and his iconic mechanical arm. This is Uncle Marine. Before everyone could think about it, there was a slight sound of footsteps behind him. Luffy turned his head and looked at Shenmue, who came out of the room. With a smile on his face, he waved, Uncle. Shenmue, who was looking from afar, turned his head suddenly, looked at the figure waving below, and said viciously, Don't call me uncle in the future. Hee. The corners of Shenmue's mouth twitched, and he glanced at Luffy angrily, then turned his eyes to the two fainted. Shenmue turned around and went downstairs, walking slowly towards the two of Ainbin's, with a solemn expression. Walking closer, he slowly bent down, put the two of them one after the other, carried them on his shoulders, and said without looking back, I'll come when I go. Without waiting for Luffy and the others to reply, he jumped overboard. The sound of crashing, splashing, sounded, and a whale instantly surfaced, and Shenmue just landed on its large, thick black back. Shenmue sat cross-legged on the back of a whale, folded his arms across his chest, and looked at the warship in the distance with a serious face. Ain and Binz were also put down by him. After a while, Shenmue rode a huge black whale to the side of the warship. A group of soldiers stood beside the boat with nervous expressions on their faces, and at the same time, they aimed the black muzzles in their hands at Shenmue, 10 meters away. Zephyr, who was still in a coma, was also guarded in the center of the crowd. New Marine, whose face was covered in a brown hood, Shenmue pouted and whispered, If it wasn't for the spears in your hands, I would have thought you were magicians. In this way, Shenmue sat on the black whale and looked at the soldiers on the warship with a calm expression. Seeing that the incoming person didn't seem to have any intention of attacking, Vivi breathed a sigh of relief among the soldiers. Shenmue's oracle moved, and an extremely subtle voice entered his ears, and he turned to look at Ain beside him. I saw that Vivi got up from the ground, her eyes were closed, and she covered her forehead with a look of pain. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes and began to look at the scenery around him, and the bald man who suddenly appeared. Who are you? Looking at the bald young man who suddenly appeared beside him, Ain's pupils shrank, he subconsciously touched his back, took out two Higan fire gun, aimed at Shenmue and fired two, bang bang, shots. The corners of Chen Mu's mouth twitched, and his body sitting cross-legged instantly leaned back, dodging these two deadly bullets. The sound of gunfire here naturally attracted the attention of everyone on the warship, but due to the size of a whale, the soldiers could not directly see what was happening above, and could only scratch their heads and stare at each other. Cough cough. Just when the soldiers didn't know whether to attack or not, a faint coughing sound came out. Zephyr, who was slowly propping up on the ground. Zephyr's mouth was open, his breathing was short and rapid, and a look of exhaustion appeared on his face after all the vicissitudes of life. After a short while, Zephyr's breathing gradually eased, and he slowly opened his eyes, looking at the excited soldiers, Vivi Isho, and said, "I'm all right." Then, looking left and right, a bad omen came to my mind. "Where are Al-Ain and Binz?" Everyone bowed their heads and did not answer, the atmosphere stagnant for a moment, and fell into a dead silence. After a brief silence, a burst of gunshots sounded, and at the same time a very familiar voice sounded. Overgrown. Hearing his student's voice, Zephyr sank his brows and looked at the huge object beside him. "This is Aquaman class." Zephyr's expression froze, and he looked at the behemoth in disbelief. The surrounding warships are inlaid with a large number of sea stones, how can there be sea kings close to? After a short period of shock, Zephyr's eyes narrowed, and without hesitation, he jumped over the heads of everyone, moved around, and reached the top of the warship. At the same time, I also saw the scene on the back of this behemoth. Chapter 46. A new round of blind box fishing is about to begin. It's him. Zephyr's pupils shrank, seeing the situation on the back of the behemoth. Seeing the very familiar white-robed baldback, and the students Ain and Binz who were in a hard fight, Zephyr was stunned for a moment. And the man who almost crushed his head was sitting cross-legged with a dull face, letting the sharp blade slashed on his bare forehead. The sound of banging could be heard. "Oh, are you awake?" At this moment, Chen Mu, who was aware of it, turned his head leisurely and said to Zephyr, whose eyes were a little out of focus, "I'm almost falling asleep waiting for it." Having said that, Chen Mu yawned in response to the occasion, and at the same time, the back of his head made another bang, and received a jump cut from Binz. Teacher Ain, who was panting, also saw Zephyr on the warship, and a flash of joy flashed in his eyes. Then the complexion became solemn again, and the tone was a little heavy. "Teacher, hurry up, this man is too strong, we will hold him back." "Yeah, teacher, hurry up," Binz added eagerly. The reactions of Binz and Ain reminded Zephyr of the traineeship incident many years ago, and the bastard pirate with a long-handled naginata sounded. Damn. Seeing Binz and Ain who were almost collapsed, Zephyr gritted his teeth, kicked his feet hard, and charged towards Chen Mu. "How could I leave my students and run away?" Zephyr, who was in the air, shouted at the two of them with anger in his eyes. "Chen Mu, please open your eyes and see clearly, it's me who has been beaten all the time." Chen Mu laughed angrily at the reaction of the three masters and apprentices. "Obviously you are beating me all the time, but you are still wronged. It's too late, it's too soon." Zephyr's figure quickly approached, and the incomparably thick mechanical stone wall was about to smash heavily on Chen Mushuai's face. Hu tilde. The wind whistled, and Chen Mu's heavy mechanical arm was thrown back and avoided. Zephyr only felt a flower before his eyes, and the figure of the bald man had disappeared before his eyes. The enemy in front of him suddenly disappeared, making Zephyr a little stunned. He didn't even have time to stop the offensive, so he rammed straight into Ain, who was in a daze. "Hey, old man, don't be so irritable, okay?" Looking at the giant fist that swiped from the tip of his nose, Chen Mu spit out a word of disgust, and then grabbed his right hand upwards, grabbing Zephyr's ankle, and his forward lunging posture stopped instantly. "Can't you just sit down and have a good talk?" When Zephyr heard this sentence, the whole person was flying back at a faster speed, deeply embedded in the stone wall on the top floor of the warship. Sorry, lost it. Zephyr, who failed to fly into the window in the correct posture, Chenmu scratched his head in embarrassment. Then he turned his head and said to the stunned duo. Or, you go to rescue him first, and then come back and continue to chop. Chenmu scolded Isho. Zephyr, who was knocked back with a single blow, Ain covered his mouth and snorted softly, with a deep worry in his eyes. At this time, hearing Chenmu's extremely arrogant words again, he glared at Chenmu angrily and jumped towards the distant warship. Binz threw the long knife that was almost curling to the side, followed closely behind. Accompanied by 2 faint wind whistles, the 2 of Binz also jumped back to the warship, and one of them grabbed one of Zephyr's arms and pulled it out from the wall. The 2 held Zephyr's arms and jumped down from the top of the warship. A group of worried soldiers immediately surrounded the 2 and asked Zephyr's status with concern. Ain and Binz looked at each other and shook their heads at the soldiers, indicating that the teacher was fine. Afterwards, he handed Zephyr to a strong master soldier, carried it on his back, and went to the medical room. Ain crossed the crowd and walked to the side of the boat. After a brief hesitation, Ain finally raised his fair and pretty face, and said to the big round eyes of a whale. You're not a pirate, so I'd like to talk to you. Chenmu, who was sitting cross-legged on the whale's back, was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and chuckled. It's long overdue. Wow tilde tilde. The huge fish body began to sink, and bursts of waves were startled. When the descending road reached a certain height, Chenmu lightly patted the broad back, indicating that it could stop. Then, facing Ain indifferently, Isho said, let's talk. Ain pursed his lips, and his gaze towards Chenmu gradually became firm, and he slowly said, what do you want? Fried Yao Rock, Chenmu said indifferently. Looking at Ain, whose expression gradually became surprised, he added with a smile, give it to me, you won't be able to use it anyway. Ain directly ignored Chenmu's second half sentence and said in shock, how did you know we had fried Yao rocks? There's no way you knew we had rock fry. You're marine. After a brief thought, Ain instantly associates Chenmu's identity. In this regard, Chenmu is too lazy to explain. After all, he was really marine. In this regard, Chenmu is a light Isho. Fry me Yao Rock and I'll let you go. Ain lowered his head, pursed his lips tightly, and was very anxious. Fried Yao Rock is the most important part of the teacher's plan. There must be no loss, but this person is too strong. After a while, Ain raised his head, a trace of determination flashed on his fair little face, and nodded heavily. Okay, I can give it to you. But you have to tell me what you need it for. Chenmu glanced at Ain in front of him with a strange expression, pouted his lips, and said calmly, tell you, you don't understand either. After a pause, he supported his chin with his left hand, glanced at Ain and the soldiers behind him, and said calmly. Put the fried Yao Rock into a lifeboat, and you can leave. It's best not to play tricks. I can detect it if there is one less piece. The hooded soldiers were still in a state of waiting, not taking Chenmu's words to heart. Okay. Ain lowered his head, his tone very heavy. Ain, looking at the lonely Ain, Binz slowly retracted his outstretched hand, turned around, and said to the dazed soldier. Everyone, execute the order. Ah, yes. The soldier was awakened by Binz's snort, and then ran to the ammunition depot in a little panic. Seeing the crowd that dispersed in a hurry, Chenmu's mouth turned VV up, and he thought. He can open the blind box again. As far as I know, the blasting Yao Rock is as powerful as an ancient weapon, and it has strong destructive power after it explodes. If it is stored on Brother Luffy's boat. At this moment, a slightly questioning voice sounded behind Chenmu. Damn it, scare me. Chenmu turned back suddenly, looking overly frightened. Jinbei, when did you follow me? After saying that, Chenmu looked behind Jinbei again, but did not see the shadow of the Sunny. Swimming here, Jinbei responded with a straight face. Quote. Quote. Chen Mu was speechless. Why did you come here? Why did you disappear when you were fighting on the boat just now? Looking at Jinbei with a serious face, Chen Mu decided to change the subject. The sea kings you summoned almost overturned the Sunny, and I was slid into the sea. Oh, Chen Mu glanced at Jinbei lightly, with a, guess I believe it or not, look. You haven't answered the old man's words. Report. All the fried rocks have been deposited on the lifeboat. At this moment, a soldier saluted the backs of Bin Zain and the two of them, loudly reporting the work, and at the same time, it also attracted the attention of Chen Mu Jinbei. Well done, Chen Mu secretly praised, then got up and jumped onto the boat full of red canned liquids. Without turning his head, he said, Ah Jing, take Jinbei back to the boat first, I will come later. After saying that, he lay on the stern of the boat, grasped the edge of the boat with both hands, took a sharp breath, and then blew it hard. Call. The rushing wind sounded, and the oared boat instantly turned into a motorboat, causing two white water lines to shoot straight into the distance. It didn't take long for Chen Mu to disappear in front of everyone's eyes. Chapter 47 Fragment Progress stuck at 99%. A small boat floated quietly on the boundless sea, surrounded by only the boundless blue water. Chen Mu stood at the stern of the boat, rubbing his hands excitedly, and muttering in his mouth, let me see what strange, legendary items the system sent me this time. Someone was thinking about it without knowing it, completely forgetting the last blind box draw, and what he drew was a useless legendary item. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successful fishing with fried Yao Rock, get a blind box 1. Chen Mu ignored it and quickly picked up the liquid frying pan from the side. The glass jar, the bait and the rod are thrown, the whole set of actions is smooth, all in one go. As for why the automatic reloading system is not used this time, Chen Mu's mysterious issue. How can the mysteries of metaphysics be comprehended by your little system? With the passage of time, the red tanks full of boats quickly decreased, and the exquisite gift boxes with black bottom and red surface that were caught were piled higher and higher, gradually forming a 3-meter-high hill. When the last red tank was thrown into the sea, with the familiar ding sound, Chen Mu nodded contentedly, and took the opportunity to put the fishing rod into the system space. Then it's time to witness the miracle. Chen Mu stopped drinking, and his whole body burst out with incomparably dazzling brilliance. Open it for me. Chen Mu's eyes flashed brightly, his hands turned into afterimages, and he opened each gift box at a lightning-fast speed. And the black and red gift box hill is melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. Open black lens bracket ding, ding, ding. Close black lens bracket. A series of system prompts resounded in Chen Mu's mind. When the nearly 100 gift boxes were quickly dismantled, Chen Mu sighed and wiped the sweat on his forehead. Come on, let me witness the arrival of Emperor O. Chen Mu secretly prayed in his heart, then closed his eyes and sank his mind into the system space. Seeing this incomparably empty storage compartment again, Chen Mu couldn't help but lift his heart and continued to scroll down. After a short while, the inventory was finally turned to the bottom. Looking at the shard-like object in the corner, Chen Mu's mind sank, and there was a bad premonition. No. It's going to be bad. Chen Mu secretly swallowed his saliva and tapped his fingers tremblingly. Open black lens bracket weapon forging fragments X99. Close black lens bracket. Note: 100 weapon forging shards can be used to synthesize the weapon forging function. The current shard is 99/100. Chen Mu was startled. This was the first time he had caught debris. Glancing at the numbers in the lower right corner, he found that Bailey had not increased. Chen Mu raised his eyebrows in surprise and thought to himself, could it be that this system is running out of money? Shaking his head, Chen Mu refocused his gaze on the fragment that only occupied one space. Looking at the striking, by 99 feet, he couldn't help but fell into contemplation. Stands to reason, they should all be here, how can there be one less? On the other side, the frozen broken island. Kizaru stood quietly in the air, with one hand in his trouser pocket and the other hand holding the glass jar containing the red liquid. After wasting so much time, I only found one. It's really troublesome. Kizaru curled his lips in disgust, and threw the extremely dangerous high-explosive material at the vice admiral behind him. And this group of serious-looking vice admirals changed their faces in an instant, crowded together in panic, raised their hands in the air, and stared intently at the red parabola in the air. Don't squeeze, be careful. Yamakaji, quickly throw away the cigar. Ah, I refuse. Having said that, the bearded Vice Admiral Yamakaji exited the crowd in an instant. Looking at the Vice Admirals who used to be serious, but now they are like children robbing toys, a gentle smile spreads on their faces. On the other side of the sea. Several warships surrounded the main ship like the stars and the moon, and began to slowly evacuate. Ain and Bin stood on the bow with heavy expressions in the fleet that was moving away. And Jinbei and the huge Sea King, floating on the sea, watched their departure. Main ship bow. Ain pulled a reluctant smile from the corner of his mouth, and the beautiful eyes that were looking into the distance gradually lost focus, and his eyes were a little blurred. Bins, you said that the teacher is awake, how are we going to face him? Teacher, I don't know either. Bins laughed miserably and shook his head. The two bowed their heads and said nothing, making the atmosphere instantly heavy. On the sparkling sea. Jinbei floated half of his body on the sea, quietly watching the departure of this special fleet, could not help but feel a little disappointed. It's easy to get Marine to retreat, he's a trustworthy partner. Said, he touched a whale, beside him, but was hidden by him imperceptibly. For this, Jinbei coughed awkwardly, turned and swam towards the Sunny. On the other side, Chen, who had been thinking hard, decided to give up. Thinking. Just ask them directly. After thinking about it for a long time, my brain hurts. Chen Mu lay on his back on the boat with a comfortable face, quietly waiting for the arrival of a whale. After a while, waves swayed on the calm sea. Chen Mu's slightly closed eyes slowly opened, and Vivi raised the corner of his mouth. Hee, here we come. Chen Mu sat up and looked towards a certain direction of the sea with a smile on his face. And just under the sea that Chen Mu was looking at, a huge shadow formation was rapidly approaching. Wow! The sound of the waves sounded, and the huge whale slowly emerged from the water. The big black eyeballs, when they saw Chen Mu again, suddenly curved into a crescent moon, and the happy whale chirping was endless. Okay, if you call again, you will overturn the ship. Chen Mu grabbed the edge of the ship and shook his head helplessly. After all, after the ship's body gradually stabilized, Chen Mu jumped lightly and jumped onto Ah Jing's back. And Ah Jing let out a happy cry, turned the huge body gently, and hurried away in the direction from which it came. Just as the three parties went their separate ways, a large white whale-shaped sailboat slowly sailed into this sea area. And the direction it was heading was exactly the direction in which the Neo-Freshman Marine was evacuated. Pirates and Neo-Marine discovered each other. Found a pirate ship ahead. The warning sound from the top of the warship sounded, and Ain and Bins walked out of the health room one after the other, covering the sadness on their faces, and said in a cold tone, everyone, prepare to fight. And the other side. Van Oka, who also found the warship, jumped down from the observation deck at the top of the main mast, the purple-black cloak behind him screeching. Captain, there is Marine. Blackbeard let out a sigh, and took out a monocular with a noble aura from his arms, gleaming with gold. The others also walked to the bow one after another and looked towards the shadow of the ship in the distance. After a while, Blackbeard put the pure gold monocular in his arms and grinned at the crowd. Guys, enjoy the battle. Everyone was stunned for a moment, and looked at Blackbeard with doubts on their faces, but before everyone could ask questions, a very slight gunshot sounded, attracting everyone's attention. Van Oka, _. Seeing that Van Oka had opened fire on Marine in the distance, everyone no longer hesitated and entered the artillery room one after another, preparing to give the guys on the opposite side a round of wonderful artillery baptism. Neo's new Marine main ship. Not long after Aang gave the battle order, the sound of breaking through the sky at a high speed followed, and then there was the sound of wood shattering. Binz, who was standing beside him, frowned, looking for prestige. I saw that the black Marine flag above my head was shot off, swaying and falling down like a piece of rag. Bastard pirates! Aang and Binz's pupils shrank, and their anger surged. A war between the two sides is imminent. And on the sea less than half an hour away from the Neo warship, Kizaru was rushing over on a huge warship. Note: the direction of Aang et al. Going is still the island where the second lava lake is located, which is the volcanic sightseeing island, and the direction of Kizaru et al. Is the same. Chapter 48 Zephyr chases down heroes. Blackbeard's bounty is 2 billion. At this time, Chen Yu was lying on the back of a whale, with Erlang's legs crossed. Shi Shiren rushed to the Sunny. Why is the weapon forging function so close to the door, but he is not in a hurry? It's no wonder he can. After all, only enemy and friendly cursors are marked on the system map. When Chen Yu and Aang completed the transaction, Neo Marine was no longer recognized as an enemy, and the corresponding red cursor disappeared from the map. For this reason, Chen Yu once again despised the system and complained that it didn't even have the function of searching for NPCs. At this time, the white whale ship and the huge axe blade ship successfully docked, and the two sides officially began a hand-to-hand battle. Bang! Badgers, whose body was bulging, jumped onto the warship first, laughed arrogantly, bent his hands like claws, and went straight to the slender Aang. A hint of disgust flashed across Ain's pretty face, her palm glowed with pink brilliance, and she slapped the rushing badgers hard. Bang! Palms connected, Aang was repelled by Badger's tremendous force, and the black high-heeled shoes also fell into the deck due to the tremendous force. Although she was tense all over, the strength of Badger's was too strong, so that she had no way to control the body that was retreating rapidly, and plowed out 2 long ravines on the ground. Fortunately, Binz rushed behind her in time and blocked her, which prevented her from being knocked out of the boat by a giant force and falling into the sea. Thank you, Binz. Aang Vivi gasped. Binz made a light, and whispered, be careful. Then the whole person disappeared in place, the afterimage flashed by in the air, and Binz appeared directly above Badger's, stomping on his head with a golden rooster independent posture. At this time, Badgers also noticed the attack from above, grinned, and punched his right fist up. Originally a self-confident Badgers, a pink glow shone from his body, and the well-saved offensive was also taken aback, and even his muscles began to contract in a certain proportion. What happened? Badgers was startled, and before he had time to get familiar with the changes in his body, Binz, who fell from the sky, slammed his head into his head, smashed through the deck instantly, and fell into it. Be careful! Aang exclaimed, awakening Binz who was about to pursue him. Watching the 2 pink flames approaching rapidly, Binz subconsciously leaned back, dodging the backward shot that was about to hit him and the fierce attack that almost decapitated him. Seeing that his attack had failed, Shiryu took a sigh of relief and took a cigar. He recovered the blade that had been cut horizontally, and changed it to a slash. The blood-red blade slashed through in an instant, splitting the 2 flames thrown by Aang into 2 halves. Dissipated in the air. Just when Shiryu's old power was not gone and his new power was not born, Binz, who was leaning back, took advantage of the trend and kicked his right foot towards Shiryu behind him. Shiryu's pupils shrank, and he couldn't react in time, so he could only turn his head to the side, hoping to avoid this fierce kick. With a bang, Lafitte with a purple cane arrived in time, and the bottom of the cane hit Binz's instep hard, blocking Shiryu's fierce attack. Regardless of the pain in the back of his feet, Binz knew that he could not hesitate at this moment. He stomped his right foot, which was kicked back, and tightened his abdomen instantly. He rushed forward in a relay, and hurried away in the direction of Ain. After a sudden roll forward, Binz's vigorous posture instantly twisted his waist, turned around, and stopped firmly beside Ain. In this short period of confrontation, Teach and others all jumped to the warship, and Badgers, who was 12 years younger, also jumped out of the pothole. Teach glanced at young Badgers, then turned to look at Ain, with a flash of greed in his eyes. Hee, what an interesting ability. Teach grinned, and the dark aura on his right hand began to surround. Lafitte pushed up her hat with her left hand, and with a slight push with her right thumb, the blade in the staff flashed a cold light. Vasco's shot at the back of the crowd was even more exaggerated. He took out a huge barrel directly from the seam of his chin, carried it directly on his right shoulder, and aimed at Ain and others not far away. All of a sudden, the sound of the sword being unsheathed and the sound of bullets being loaded can be heard incessantly. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Kick, kick, kick. A burst of heavy footsteps sounded, causing both sides who were about to fight to stop. Everyone turned their heads, looked up. I saw a sturdy old man walking out of the door on the second floor. Teacher. Ain lightly covered his mouth, tears flashing in his eyes. The soldiers also cheered, and the heavy atmosphere instantly dissipated. Other hand, Teach and the others frowned and pondered, looking at the eyes of the old man on the second floor with deep doubts. This old man is a little familiar. Just when everyone was puzzled, Shiryu's breathing gradually became rapid, and he stuttered, yes. It's Black Arm Zephyr, the marine powerhouse at the same time as Sengoku Garp. Everyone was startled, and their faces gradually became solemn. I remember this person, the current Admiral Kizaru, Akainu, and Marshal Kuzan, all seem to be his students. Sanyuan Wolf's gruff voice also came over. What? Everyone trembled, only to feel that this time they might have played a big game. Teach swallowed hard, and with his left hand behind his back, made a gesture of preparation to attack. Everyone's heart froze, and then they understood in an instant. It's definitely impossible to walk, so let's get rid of them quickly before marine support arrives. At this time, Feng Shui took turns, and a heavy atmosphere descended on the heads of the Blackbeard pirates. ... With a bang, Zephyr jumped down from the second floor, landed in front of Ain and Binz, and said lightly. Is it a pirate? Report. It's a pirate, and next to them is their pirate ship. A soldier saluted the military salute and said in a passionate tone. Hearing this, Zephyr nodded lightly, glanced at the white whale boat next to him, and his pupils shrank subconsciously. This is Edward Newgate's boat. Zephyr's heart sank, and the look in Teach and the others' eyes became more solemn. No matter who the pirate group is, they will be wiped out. After speaking, Zephyr's eyes narrowed, waving his giant mechanical arm, and rushed up first. Ain stepped lightly on his feet and jumped into the air. The pink flames came first and directly aimed at Van Oka and the ship Dr. Q, who were holding a spear. Bang bang, 2 gunshots rang out, and the flames exploded in the air. Zephyr, who was waving his robotic arm, also rushed directly in front of Teach, smashed the stone arm, and opened his robotic fingers to grab Teach's head. Dark water. Teach glared angrily and shouted. The palms entwined with the dark aura swung out instantly and slammed into the heavy mechanical arm. Zephyr from the right, but was blocked by the sudden appearance of Binz. Lafitte's cold Isho turned and came out from the other side, and the slender blade that glowed with cold light stabbed directly into Zephyr's abdomen. Clang tilde. A sound of gold and stone colliding, Lafitte's pupils shrank, and she looked at the black arm that was holding her cane and sword tightly. This is armament hardening. And how could this old man react so quickly? Thinking of this, the confused Lafitte looked up, collided with Zephyr's eyes, looking at the deep contempt in the other's eyes. Lafitte's heart trembled, she gritted her teeth angrily, and let go of her hands the sword of the stick, quickly retreated. The attacks of the crowd were blocked by Ain and Binz one after another. At this time, Blackbeard's strength was exhausted, his hands were tightly clamped by Zephyr's stone arms, and he lifted them up, and the screams of pain resounded in everyone's ears. "Captain!" everyone exclaimed. The calm and Kamju hitter, Yinyu, Van Oka quietly retreated to the back of the crowd, and pulled the trigger on Zephyr from the gap between the crowd. Shoo! An extremely subtle sound of breaking through the air sounded, followed by the sound of bullets shooting through the flesh. Zephyr's body trembled imperceptibly, a trace of blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. On the left chest, there is an extra transparent hole. "Teacher!" Seeing the bullet passing through his chest, Ain exclaimed, and the tears from the corners of his eyes couldn't stop pouring out of his eyes. Hearing Ain's piercing cry, Binz's heart trembled, he forced Shiryu to retreat, and quickly retreated to Zephyr's side. "Teacher, you," Binz said worriedly. Zephyr threw the slender blade aside, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand, and said weakly, "I'm fine." Cough, continue to attack. "No, teacher, you need treatment now." Ain ran over eagerly. "Ahem, I said it's fine, I can't let these damn pirates escape again." Zephyr's cough got worse, and at the same time, looking at Teach's eyes, a flash of madness flashed. "Damn pirates. They shouldn't exist in this world. Die!" Smash, blast. Boom. The raging flames spread instantly, accompanied by a strong shock wave, constantly invading everyone. "Damn, how can this old man be so strong?" Everyone from the Blackbeard pirates put up their arms to block. "Ah!" Teach's miserable howl kept echoing in everyone's ears. At this moment, the huge warship suddenly tilted to the side, and everyone was unstable and slipped. "I'm here to save you, Captain." Huge Han Sanyuan Wolf, holding the front and rear ends of the warship, slowly overturned the huge warship. The sound of popping continued. In a panicked exclamation, the main ship of the Neo Marine was completely overturned by Wolf, and everyone on board fell into the water. The people who sank into the sea reacted quickly and swam towards their mates, while Badgers, who had regained his strong body, was carrying Teach, who was completely black. Shiryu carried the comatose Katarina Devon, and the evil king, Avalo Pizarro held shot in one hand and Zephyr's right robotic arm in the other, and swam upwards. Ain and Binz were also rescued by other marine soldiers. Woe tilde. Shiryu and the others surfaced one after another, and were supported by a huge palm and placed on their shoulders. Ain and Binz were carried by the soldiers into the lifeboats and headed to several other warships. After a long time, the capable people who fell into the water woke up one after another. Ain and Binz, who were lying in the treatment room, choked a few mouthfuls of seawater one after another, and sat up in pain. Ain shook his head, opened his beautiful eyes and looked left and right, only to find Binz who was coughing violently, but not the respectable figure, so he couldn't help but hurriedly said, "Where is the teacher?" The eyes of the soldiers around him dimmed instantly. "Speak up, teacher." Seeing that everyone didn't answer, Ain couldn't help but feel even more worried. "You, get out of the way for me." Ain, who had already guessed the result, burst into tears in an instant, pushed away the soldiers who were blocking the door, and walked out staggeringly. "Hey!" Binz chased after him, sighed softly, and patted Ain on the shoulder. 2 lines of clear tears fell, and Ain tightly covered his cheeks with his hands and sat down on his knees. At this time, only this one remained in their fleet. The rest, either chopped in two by Shiryu, or smashed to pieces by Wolf. If Admiral Kizaru hadn't arrived, I'm afraid they would have been completely wiped out here. At this moment, Kizaru's voice came from above everyone's heads. "Well, I've caught up. If there's nothing else, I'll hang up first." The other end of the phone to respond, Kizaru directly closed the phone bug watch on his left hand, hung up the phone, and then jumped and landed on the guardrail in front of Ain and Binz. He opened his mouth and yawned, and asked weakly, "Where is the fried Yao rock?" Glancing at the sad two, Kizaru frowned slightly, and said in a cold tone, "Where's Teacher Zephyr?" Wu Ain was still sitting on the ground and weeping. Vince raised his head with a haggard expression, glanced at Kizaru who was aloof, gave a miserable smile, and shook his head. Kizaru frowned and looked at the soldier behind the two. The soldier at the forefront hesitated for a while, and said angrily, "Killed by those damn pirates." Kizaru's pupils shrank, and his expression became solemn. Although he and Zephyr had never been at odds, hearing the news of his death was another story, and... "I see." After saying that, Kizaru turned into thousands of light spots and gathered towards the huge warship beside him. After a while, the top of the warship. Countless photoelectric lights converged into a single figure. Kizaru glanced at the busy people below, and calmly removed the hat on the phone bug's head. "Hello, Kizaru." Kuzan's voice called on the other end of the phone. "Well, it's me. What's the matter? Tell me quickly, I'm a little busy right now." Kuzan's tone was a little hurried, and from time to time there was the sound of flipping documents. "Well, it's nothing important, just to tell you that Mr. Zephyr is dead." Kizaru's tone was flat, as if he was talking about a very common thing. "Well, it's fine, then I have to keep busy." "What? Teacher Zephyr is dead?" Seeing the phone bug jumping up, Kizaru took it away with a look of disgust, and plucked out his deaf ear with his pinky finger. After a while, Kizaru slowly brought the phone bug back in front of him, and said with a firm tone, "Well, dead." Kuzan's heavy breathing on the phone. After adjusting his breath for a while, Kuzan calmed down a little, but the tone became a little cold. "You killed." Hey, it's none of my business, Blackbeard did it." Kizaru had a, "Don't wrong me," look on his face. Later, he added, "When I arrived, I saw that they were destroying the warship, and after 2 random kicks, they fled, and I also asked you, it was you who told me to let me leave them alone." Hearing this, Kuzan on the other end fell silent for a moment. "What about fried Yao rocks?" "One of those ragged icebergs was found, and the one in their hands seems to have been snatched by a bald man." "Steal it, I see," Kuzan mused. Pause, he continued, "You escort the rest to impel down the matter of fried Yao rock. You don't have to worry about it." Then, without waiting for Kizaru to respond, Kuzan hung up the phone. After a long time, Chen Yu, who arrived late, only saw an empty warship and some warship wrecks. To this end, Chen Yu scratched his head in confusion, then clicked on the map, glanced at the yellow cursor, representing neutrality, patted the big head of a whale, and signaled it to catch up and take a look. In the days following the incident, Marine Headquarters issued 2 world-class announcements. 1. The former Marine Admiral, Black Arm Zephyr, was killed by the Blackbeard pirates in a sneak attack while guarding the important material, fried Yao rock, special, posthumously named a hero. 2. Blackbeard robbed the fried Yao rock, comparable to ancient weapons, intending to invade various countries in the New World, and the danger is enough to threaten the major kingdoms. For Captain Marshall D. Teach, the bounty has been increased to 2 billion. Regarding Zephyr's posthumous title as a hero, there were many twists and turns. As a marshal, Kuzan tried his best to win several times before he got the promise from above. After all, Zephyr accidentally injured too many Marines when he snatched fried Yaoyan, which once aroused the disgust of the soldiers. But under the joint suppression of Kuzan and Akainu, this gradually subsided. Chapter 49. He lay down by himself, and I have no melon. On the rough sea. Kizaru was sitting on the noble chair in the bow, and behind him were the 2 kneeling Binzain, both of whom were clasped by seastone. After being silent for a long time, Kizaru said calmly, "I need to confirm that you didn't secretly hide the fried Yao rock, but really gave it to a light bald pirate." The 2 kneeling looked at each other, and a trace of humiliation flashed in their eyes. Ain pursed his lips tightly. After struggling violently in his heart, he bit his lip and said bitterly, "If we don't agree to his request, I'm afraid we won't be able to live." That bald pirate, very strong, you can go to him if you don't believe me. Binz added hurriedly. You don't talk anymore. By Binz from the bad memories of the previous few days, Kizaru's forehead throbbed violently, trying his best to suppress the anger in his heart. Do you think you can't beat it? Replace me. I can't beat it either. Kizaru groaned wildly in his heart. Kizaru took a deep breath and was about to divert the subject, but was interrupted by the sound of warning above the warship. Alert! There is a huge sea king behind, and it is expected to hit us in 1 minute. The broadcast sounded at the top of the watchtower. Sea kings. Everyone was stunned. Looking at the dazed vice admiral, Kizaru pouted and said with a dull expression, "Oh scary sea kings. Momonga, I'll leave it to you tilde." "Yes, Your Excellency." Momonga nodded solemnly. "Okay, let's change the subject." Kizaru clapped his hands lightly, making Ain and Binz look back at him. Continued. Without, Fried Yaoyan, how would you fulfill Z's last wish? Hearing this, Ain's pupils Vivi shrank, and his mouth opened, as if he had been guessed. "We don't know," Binz said ruefully. Binz didn't know he could understand. After all, he wasn't the one who handled the day-to-day military affairs. Don't look at Kizaru's sleepless appearance, but someone who can become an admiral is definitely not an ordinary person. Kizaru didn't even look at Binz, his eyes full of pressure on the blue-haired girl. He knew that after Zephyr's death, she would be the only commander. In other words, she's the new admiral. Although Kizaru still had a smile on his face, from Ain's point of view, this smile did not feel any warmth at all, only the endless coldness. When it comes to the safety of the whole new world, even this lazy admiral has to work hard. Just when the atmosphere almost solidified, the sharp announcement sounded again. Enemy attack. Kizaru's eyes twitched again. What the hell, can't you let me finish the question quietly, it's delaying my rest time. Kizaru complained in his heart. Kizaru sighed helplessly. No way, since the enemy has already attacked the door, the interrogation can only be interrupted. Kizaru stood up slowly, released his arms holding his arms, and raised his right foot with a mocking expression. Before he stepped down, his entire body turned into countless golden light spots and gathered towards the top of the warship. Several vice admiral also took out their weapons with solemn expressions and ran towards the stern. Already had conjectures about Momonga, who had not returned for a long time. After a while, the stern was crowded, and the 4 vice admirals stood at the forefront. Kizaru stood still at the top of the warship, the marine coat behind him squeaked by the blowing hunting. Looking at the rapidly approaching sea kings, Kizaru's eyes narrowed slightly. No, to be precise, it should be looking at the bald man on the back of the sea king. It's really him. Ellipsis. At this moment, on the incomparably thick black back of a whale, a vice admiral with mohawk hair was lying motionless with his eyes closed. On its back sits a bald man dressed in yellow with a white cloak fluttering behind him. It was Chen Mu. That's right, a whale has caught up with this yellow cursor, under the command of Chen Mu. But what Chen Mu didn't know was that the yellow cursor, at this time was slowly turning to crimson. Between him and Marine is quietly rising. Ellipsis. Chen Mu Vivi raised his eyebrows and looked at everyone at the stern with a little thought. The few vice admirals who have only met once, and can only rely on the memories in his mind to identify them one by one. But he still had a fresh memory of the figure in yellow at the top of the warship. After all, I just hit someone a few days ago. Chen Mu coughed softly, moved his butt off Momonga's back, then showed a smile on his face, and said to Kizaru in the distance. Ah, long time no see, old Huang. As he said, he waved at Kizaru. I don't know I thought it was an old friend who reunited after a long absence." Everyone turned their heads to look at Kizaru, who was in the high place, and there was a hint of confusion in their eyes, and they thought, "Is this person a friend of your Excellency Admiral?" Kizaru looked at everyone's strange eyes, and the corners of his eyes twitched. Then he took a deep breath, turned into a golden beam, and shot towards Chen Mu. Looking at the golden light that shot quickly, the smile on Chen Mu's face did not diminish, and he still had a calm look. He knew that Kizaru wouldn't do anything to him. Or, he dare not. Sure enough, the light beam spread out, and Kizaru appeared 10 meters away from Chen Mu, and said with some disgust, "Unknown person, why are you following again?" Pause, he added, "Let's talk first, I don't want to fight this time. If you want a boat, just take it directly." After saying that, he raised his hands with a mocking expression, expressing surrender. Kizaru with a weird expression, the smile on Chen Mu's face froze. "Do you really think of me as a pirate who robs the sea?" In this regard, Chen Mu just laughed, too lazy to explain. Looking at Chen Mu, who was smiling and said nothing, Kizaru hesitated for a while, pointed to Momonga on the ground, and said, "Can you let me take that guy back first?" Then he pouted and added, "Of course, if you don't want to pay it back, you can put forward conditions. I will pass on your request to our marshal." After that, he inserted his hands into his trouser pockets again, turned around and was about to leave. "Don't you want to listen to my conditions? How to just turn around and leave?" Chen Mu couldn't help complaining. Afterwards, Chen Mu rolled his eyes speechlessly, pressed his right hand on Momonga's back, and pushed it gently. Momonga spun around and slipped under Kizaru's feet. He was lightly stepped on by his right foot and stopped. Kizaru looked at Chen Mu with a faint smile on his face. Vivi raised his eyebrows, and said in a slightly questioning tone, "Then, if you're okay, I'll go first." Having said that, Kizaru lifted Momonga's collar with his right hand, and pointed his left thumb back, with a, "If you don't speak, I'll really leave," expression. Cough cough. Chen Mu coughed for a while, forcibly suppressed the desire to complain, and said solemnly, "I have something to do with Ain, she should be on your boat." "Oh, that little blue-haired girl." Kizaru narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "Little girl. Ah, yes, with blue hair." Chen Mu was stunned for a moment, then suddenly realized. Kizaru called her a little girl, and that's right, after all, he's old, at 58 now. For Ain's age, she was indeed a little girl. "She's a repeat offender that our marshal indicated and wanted me to personally escort to impel down." Kizaru frowned slightly. Pause, he pondered. "The boat can be given to you, but people can't." Chen Mu raised his eyebrows. "I'm just asking a few questions, don't be so nervous." Saying that, he gave Kizaru a kind smile. Kizaru obviously did not fully believe Chen Mu, and said with a teasing expression, "Re-offenders change hands. I'm not good at dealing with the marshal." In response, Chen Mu rolled his eyes and said speechlessly, "Or, I kick you into the sea first, and then go and snatch someone back." "Oh tilde, what a terrible person." Kizaru raised his hands and said mockingly. Without waiting for Chen Mu to react, he turned into a beam of light and shot at the warship. It seemed that there was no nostalgia for him, but he still left a whisper, which echoed in Chen Mu's ears. "You only have 10 minutes, out of date. War." Chen Mu shook his head helplessly. "I always felt that Kizaru's words were not like a joke. Is this ambiguous justice?" Chen Mu shook his head secretly and smiled bitterly. "Am I that scary?" Chapter 50. The last piece is in hand. Be long until Kizaru returns to the warship. Chen Mu jumped lightly and landed in front of several vice admiral. Glancing at the people who were staring at him, Isho calmly. Except for the big pirates such as the four emperors and Shichibukai, they have never seen unscrupulous pirates, and their faces are a bit ugly for a while. But the supreme commander of the warship, Kizaru, didn't say anything, and they were not easy to attack, so they could only silently make way for Chen Mu to go with him. Ignoring the hostility in the eyes of everyone, Chen Mu walked by with a calm and collected face. After a while, Chen Mu came to the bow and saw the two kneeling in the middle. Kizaru was the first step, sitting on the golden and red aristocratic chair, with Erlang's legs crossed, looking at Chen Mu with all his leisure. Obviously, Kizaru didn't intend to let Chen Mu out of sight, and he was also a little curious. Can make this man willing to fight against the entire marine and even ask for it. Hearing the footsteps, the two of Ain turned to look. At this moment, the pupils of the two suddenly contracted. It's you. Looking at this familiar figure, the two of them were shocked beyond words. Chen Mu didn't speak, and looked back at the two of them calmly. For a while, the only sound of the sea wind whistling was left on the crowded bow. As time passed by, Chen Mu didn't want to endure this strange feeling of weakness any longer, so he took the lead and said, "Where is the last, fried Yao rock?" Hearing this, Kizaru's pupils shrank not far away, but he quickly regained his lazy attitude, and even Vivi yawned. Chen Mu didn't notice Kizaru's abnormality, looked at Ain and the two, and said impatiently, "I'm impatient now, you better tell the truth." As Chen Mu's words fell, the atmosphere on the whole ship instantly became depressed, and even the gentle sea breeze made people feel a biting chill. It was a quiet scene. At this moment, the sleepy expression on Kizaru's face subsided, and he said in a slightly heavy tone, "You still have 5 minutes." Chen Mu glanced lightly, but did not take his words to heart. Looking at Ain, who bowed his head and said nothing, Chen Mu frowned. Kyoka Shueyu held in her left hand, turned it around and inserted it towards the deck with a reversed grip. The sharp blade was like cutting tofu, completely submerging the entire blade under the deck. Glancing at the two of Ain, whose eyes were beginning to blur, Chen Mu's mouth raised Vivi, and he said slowly, "Where is the fried Yaoyan?" Vince's pupils were blurred, and he said with a dull expression, "Stolen by the bald pirates." Light, bald pirate. The corners of Chen Mu's eyes jumped wildly, and he almost couldn't hold back his punch. Ignoring Binz, Chen Mu Vivi turned his head, stared at Ain, and said solemnly, "Where is the last, fried Yao rock?" Ain's tender body trembled, a look of fear appeared on his pale and pretty face, and he said in a trembling voice, "I was taken away by that terrifying man." Hearing this, Chen Mu fell into contemplation and began to recall the plot of the previous life. According to the plot, after encountering the Straw Hat Pirates, fried Yaoyan should be placed by Zephyr on the volcano Hot Spring Island to blow up the second island. Before they could go to the volcanic hot spring, ice stopped them halfway. Logically speaking, there should be all the fried Yao rocks, how can there be one less suddenly? Just as Chen Mu was thinking hard, a soldier with dull eyes slowly walked out of the array and murmured, "Fried Yaoyan, I hand over." Sleeveless marine suit was hit by a golden beam before he could finish speaking, and instantly turned into a sparkling star, and disappeared into the sky. Although Kizaru responded in a timely manner and kicked the soldier away, the soft whisper that was like a mosquito's groan still reached Chen Mu's ears. Kizaru Vivi turned his head and glanced carefully at Chen Mu behind him. Seeing that he was still bowing his head in deep thought, he let out a sigh of relief, raised his left hand, and wiped the sweat on his forehead. "Ha ha, I forgot about you." Chen Mu chuckled lightly. Looking at the stiff Kizaru, Chen Mu slowly pulled up Jinghua Shueyu, pacing, and slowly walked to Kizaru's side. Seeing the sweat dripping down his face, Chen Mu chuckled again. "Ha ha, the acting is good, I was almost fooled by you." Logically speaking, with Chen Mu's strength, almost everyone in the whole ship will be dragged into a fantasy world, and Kizaru is no exception. However, Chen Mu forgot that Jinghua Shueyu's cracking method should be done before the full hypnosis is activated. If you touch the knife, you can be unaffected. Coincidentally, the two of them only fought a few days ago, and it happened to be a wave of swordsmanship, which led to the dramatic scene now. Kizaru's eyeballs Vivi moved, and he glanced at Chen Mu beside him, and it turned into a golden light and disappeared, disappearing in place. At Kizaru who suddenly, running, Chen Mu shook his head and chuckled, and couldn't help but murmured in his heart. Young uncle, I'm not afraid I don't know, what is a system map? With his thoughts back, Chen Mu's figure flashed and disappeared. With Chen Mu's departure, everyone on the boat gradually separated from the environment. On the other side, Kizaru stood still on a small lifeboat, holding a glass jar with red liquid in his left hand, and his right index finger shone with golden light. After a short charge, a beam of light instantly cut through the sky, heading towards the huge Sea King in the distance. Class shot away. Boom! A violent explosion sounded, blasting the huge body of a whale into a huge hole dripping with flesh and blood, and the wound was even more bloody. A whale was in pain and kept howling. At the same time, its huge fish tail was raised high, and then it slapped hard and dived towards the deep sea. And the waves raised by the fish tail also quickly pushed the boat that Kizaru was riding into the distance. Seeing the huge black whale fleeing wounded, Kizaru nodded in satisfaction. Suddenly, an extremely dangerous omen flooded Kizaru's heart. Oops! Kizaru's heart froze. He turned around instantly, and looked at the bald man who suddenly appeared. Chen Mu tilted his head and glanced at the direction in which a whale was diving, mocking Isho, and said, "Dignified Marine Admiral, how could he still hit and run?" Although Kizaru doesn't know what hit and run means. But feeling the coldness in the eyes of the visitor, he knew that this matter could not be helped. "Let's talk, you want to be public or private?" Chen Mu said to the high-ranking Marine with a Gailuzi tone. Kizaru looked confused. Chen Mu coughed lightly, stretched out two hands towards Kizaru, and said indifferently, "It's private, you just give me that thing, I'll leave." It's just. I'll beat you up, take the things away, and leave. You choose. Chen Mu hooked Kizaru with his right hand, while his left hand held Jingwashuiyu, and calmly pulled a knife flower, pointing directly at the tip of Kizaru's nose. Threat means beyond words. Kizaru Vivi raised his eyebrows, there were a few deep forehead lines on his forehead, and he said with a teasing face. "It's terrifying. Speak to me well," Chen Mu shouted, interrupting Huang Admiral's yin and yang words. Kizaru's expression froze, and he looked at Chen Mu in confusion, thinking. Why is this person so irritable today? He didn't even let me finish the sentence. Looking at the stuck Kizaru, Chen Mu couldn't help but feel a shock, an indescribable feeling came to his heart, and he couldn't help but complain. Let you talk yin and yang strange, now you're stuck, you're in a circle, ha 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 ha. Compared to someone's rising wicked taste, Kizaru, who gradually slowed down, seemed more serious. You don't seem worried at all that I'm going to ruin it. Kizaru calmly Isho, a golden light on his fingertips. Chen Mu's arrogant laughter stopped abruptly and looked at Kizaru dazedly. Looking at Chen Mu who was suddenly stunned, Kizaru's heart was somber, and the fingertips, which were glowing with dangerous light, got a little closer. If you listen carefully, you can hear a subtle, click, sound. Looking at the tiny cracks on the glass jar, Chen Mu's eyes widened, and he rushed towards Kizaru with a violent aura. However, Kizaru had already transformed into an elemental form, allowing those golden light spots to be blown around. As soon as the violent wind stopped, he would be able to go back and forth on him. Chen Mu's face sank, and a trace of killing intent flashed in Kizaru's eyes. Ouch, what a terrifying murderous look. Kizaru sneered indifferently. Ha 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 ha. The sound of heavy breathing constantly echoed on the boat, as if trying to suppress the anger in his heart. After a short while, Chen Mu's breathing gradually stabilized, his complexion returned to a cold color, and he said lightly. Think clearly, is it worth losing your life just for such a small, fried Yao rock? The smile on Kizaru's face subsided, looking directly into Chen Mu's eyes, and said solemnly, but I know, you need this. Okay, I don't want to talk nonsense anymore. Chen Mu waved his hand impatiently. Looking at Kizaru, who kept his mouth shut, Chen Mu continued, I gave Fujitora 2 choices that day. Today, I'll give you 2 too. 1. Give me something, I won't kill you. 2. You die, this broken thing. I don't want it. After saying that, Chen Mu's aura suddenly exploded. The boat under the 2 of them also began to shake violently, and bursts of overwhelmed creaks sounded, as if it would fall apart at any time. Glancing at the boat that was about to fall apart, Kizaru sighed helplessly and threw the fried Yao rock over. Chen Mu raised his right hand lightly, caught the explosive product thrown by Kizaru, glanced at the helpless middle-aged uncle, and said softly, You are very sensible. Kizaru raised his eyebrows, Isho, and shrugged, thanks for the compliment. Then, in a nonchalant tone, he said, With your strength, if you want to destroy the new world, you don't need to use fried Yao rock, and you have no reason to destroy the new world. Right, no name. The smile on Kizaru's face gradually became more confident. Chen Mu couldn't deny it and smiled lightly. Haha, my family was not killed by the bastard pirates. Kizaru, whose smile gradually faded, Chen Mu continued, Even if he kills him, I can take his life with my own hands. Even if he is recruited by you and joins the Shichibukai under the king, he will not be able to keep him. Kizaru's pupils shrank, and he said with a shocked expression, How did you know about Teacher Zephyr's family? Judging from your age, it is impossible to know. Chen Mu raised his eyebrows and smiled without answering. Kizaru also knew that the man in front of him would definitely not tell him. After all, in the current situation, enemies outweigh friends. At the same time, there was a deep sigh of relief in the bottom of my heart. I know this person in front of me, there is a high probability that I will not use fried Yaoyan to destroy the world. After all, he didn't have a good reason. Looking at Kizaru, who was in deep thought, Chen Mu put the fried Yao rock into the storage space with no expression. Then pretend to interlock the index finger and thumb of the right hand and put it in the mouth. Ha tilde tilde tilde. Looking at Kizaru, who was standing still, accidentally sprayed with saliva by himself. Chen Mu was embarrassed by Isho, turned around quickly, jumped forcefully in a certain direction, and left without any worries. ... Not long after, the waves on the sea swelled, and a black giant whale broke out of the water and caught Chen Mu, who was falling rapidly. Then the giant tail flicked, carrying young Master Chen, and left gracefully. Leave Kizaru alone in the wind. ... Not long after they parted. A huge black whale floated quietly on the sea, with a bald man sitting on its back, swinging the fishing rod expectantly. Ha tilde tilde. A slight whistling sound passed by, followed by a dong sound. The bait goes into the water. Soon, a mechanical voice sounded in the man's mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining weapon forging fragments X1. The current shard is 100/100ths, and the conditions for enabling the weapon forging function have been reached, whether it is fused or not. Close black lens bracket. Fusion. ... Chapter 51. The forging function is open, Chen Mu is injured. Ding! Congratulations to the host, the weapon forging function is open, rewards are being distributed. Ding! Congratulations to the host for getting the original stone bait 1 advanced. As the sound of the system fell, Chen Mu, who had been looking forward to it for a long time, couldn't wait to look at the main panel of the system. Ha tilde tilde. Fortunately this time the icon is bright, not like that blind box. After quietly letting out a sigh of relief, Chen Mu's eyes lit up, and he clicked on the icon of the weapon forging system with anticipation. After clicking lightly, Chen Mu began to wait quietly, waiting. Time passed slowly, and the smile on Chen Mu's face gradually disappeared. I knew that this cheating system was not so kind, and it really tricked me. Chen Mu roared in his heart. That's right, After Chen Mu turned on the weapon forging function, the screen was blank and there was nothing. However, based on Chen Mu's knowledge of this pit system, he can guess that there are 9 out of 10 preconditions, or items missing. Well, if you can't get it for the time being, then forget it. Anyway, now he has nothing to lack. Chen Mu raised his eyebrows and comforted himself. But just when Chen Mu was about to leave the system space, his mind flashed. Preconditions or items. Chen Mu, who seemed to remember something, returned directly to the main page of the system, and then switched to the storage space. Focus on the last frame of the first row, the strange bait flashing the new logo. Open black lens bracket rough stone bait *1 close black lens bracket. Note, the original stone bait can only catch the raw materials of the major worlds, and it is only used for weapon forging. Ness. Chen Mu's mood suddenly became more comfortable, and he tapped the system fishing rod that was always arranged in the first grid. Auto reload, rough stone bait, is selected. Afterwards, he left the space full of joy. On the sea, Chen Mu sat on the big, thick black back of a whale, and with a face full of spring breeze, he took out a long fishing rod from behind, with a pebble inlaid at the top of the hook. Chen Mu held the fishing rod in both hands, raised it lightly above his head, and then threw it hard. Boom! Hearing this familiar voice, Chen Mu couldn't help recalling his childhood. There's a guy in there who likes One Piece, King of Pirates, more than he does. Thinking of this, Chen Mu couldn't help but chuckle, shook his head, and sighed. Take your time, maybe, there will be a day when you go back. Ding! Fishing is successful. Congrats to the host for obtaining the scorching rough stone, forgeable inlaid. Close black lens bracket. Chen Mu mentioned it vigorously and closed it. Chen Mu held the fishing line lightly and looked at the black stone on the hook with a puzzled expression. This thing is also worthy of being called burning flame. Inflammation. The corners of Chen Mu's mouth couldn't help twitching. After being systematically tortured, he was no longer able to complain, so he could only sigh helplessly. That's all, this pit system. Chen Mu shook his head and sighed, while pointing at this dark and ugly rough stone with his index finger. With the touch of the fingertips, the imaginary coldness did not appear, but... Hey hot. Like an electric shock, Chen Muan quickly pulled his index finger back and blew hard. What the hell, it's so hot. There's no fire. Chen Mu looked at the ordinary stone with resentment, but this time, there was a trace of contempt in his eyes. Is this a white flame? Chen Mu frowned slightly, looked at this dark round stone, original stone, carefully, and found that there were traces of space distortion around this unremarkable stone. How hot is this thing? Attacks of the 4 emperors and admiral. To put it bluntly, no one in this world can make him feel pain. But today, it was scalded by a small stone. Although he was not injured, this long-lost pain made him re-examine the existence of the system. Looks like the system can't be taken lightly anymore. Chen Mu's heart sank, and he gradually realized that he was not completely invincible. Just like the current system, the new items that appeared were already strong enough to sting him, so wouldn't the items in the future? Thinking of this, someone suddenly felt a chill on his back. However, this feeling of panic only lasted for a moment. After all, I am its host. Chen Mu Saran Isho, no longer thinking about it, refocusing his eyes on this scorching rough stone, stretched his right hand forward, gently grasped, and held this egg-sized black rough stone in his palm. Preliminary identification. This thing not only looks like a black egg, this temperature. Also like the egg that has just been peeled. In this era when the system has no identification function, Chen Mu only needs to end up in person and test the poison with his own body. Chen Mu put this rough stone into the storage space, and with a change of mind, he sank into the weapon forging page. Weapon forging function. Close black lens bracket. Scorching flame stone. It can be used for weapon fusion, inlay. Close black lens bracket. Unsurprisingly, this forging function really requires preconditions. The corners of Chen Mu's mouth twitched, and he raised his chin quite proudly. But then again, this weapon forging function can only be inlaid and fused. What about forging? Make it. Chen Mu couldn't help but complain. Open black lens bracket ding. Close black lens bracket. Reminder. The size and availability of forging materials will determine the direction and scope of use of the item. Close black lens bracket. Oh, someone responded without emotion. Che, really stingy. Chen Mu tilted his head, complaining about the system again in his heart. But this time, the system did not respond to him. After waiting for a while, after confirming that the system no longer responded to him, Chen Mu had to focus his gaze on the forging page again. I looked left and right, looked up and down, and after looking around, I couldn't find the fusion or mosaic option. Are there any preconditions? Chen's bald-headed handsome face collapsed, and he felt a sense of frustration that he had been deceived by the system. When someone looked decadent, the mature and sensible Ah Whale had already carried him back to the sunny. Ah Jing let out a soft cry and woke Chen Mu up. Huh, it's here. Chen Mu looked around blankly, and gradually came to his senses when he saw Zoro, who was sweating like rain in the observation room. Zoro also passed through the rectangular window of the observation room, glanced at Chen Mu outside the window, walked to the other side calmly, turned his back to him and entered the state of exercise again. Outside the window, Chen Mu on the giant whale scratched his head in embarrassment, always feeling that Zoro knew something. Sure enough, I still have to give Jinghua Shuiyu a new shell, otherwise, sooner or later, Zoro will give it a real hammer. Sunny. Hey, uncle, come down for the banquet. Luffy raised his head and shouted to Chen Mu above. Banquet. Chen Mu's expression changed rapidly, and he was instantly happy. Then, with a swish, Chen Mu disappeared directly from Ah Jing's back and appeared in front of Luffy. Sanji made it again and it's delicious. Oops, dizzy. When someone heard the food, he rushed down so stupidly, he forgot to take out Kyoka Suzuki and gave himself a buff. After all, Chen Mu, who is used to the food of the 21st world, really has no confidence in the food of this world. Moreover, after several years of trying, it is not worth his expectations. But Sanji is no ordinary cook. What he makes is always delicious. After a while, Chen Mu walked into the restaurant on the second floor while holding the mirror. Glancing at the brand new and bright room, I had to praise Frankie's bullshit. This repair speed is almost catching up with the system. When Chen Mu was seated, the smiling people slowly looked at Nami on the other side, and Luffy, who was strangled by Nami's neck. Well, then, everyone can start. Seeing the gentle smile on Nami's face, Chen Mu subconsciously shook and almost shook the spoon in his hand. Well, everyone is very polite. Since that's the case, let's invite our guests, this handsome little brother, let's start first. Then, pitifully said, if the guests don't start first, everyone will be hungry together. Seeing the begging in the eyes of the crowd, Chen Mu sighed faintly, picked up the knife and fork in his hand, and cut the large piece of steak full of fragrant meat on the plate. Okay, our respected guests, we have already started to enjoy the food. Then, everyone can start. Looking at everyone who was starting to wind and cloud, Robin took the special milk tea from the table and took a sip, with a gentle smile on his face. Chen Mu knew in his heart that he would not be able to escape this slaughter. He could only turn his grief and anger into appetite. With the idea of eating more and paying more, Chen Mu's meat-eating speed was not as fast as Luffy's. Seeing the mountains of delicacies gradually being eaten up by everyone, the light in Nami's eyes became brighter and brighter. Chapter 52 Feet Real Fighting, and Fake Fighting. Inside the restaurant, Chen Mu, who was full of food and drink, leaned against the soft back of the chair and raised his head comfortably. At this moment, there was a slight and rapid sound of footsteps. Dear guest, are you satisfied with this meal? Nami whispered in Chen Emu's ear with an extremely sweet voice. Chen Emu's face stiffened. He turned his head stiffly, looked at Nami who was smiling like a flower, then looked down, swallowed secretly, and said to himself. Nami is really great, I can't even hold it. Then suddenly thought of something, the tiger body shook. Oops, Nami is definitely not the one who suffers, I must be in her calculations. Chen Mu couldn't help but secretly worry. At this moment, Nami's sweet and glutinous voice sounded again. Dear guest, if you are satisfied with this meal, please also pay for this time, which is 10 million Baileys. After a pause, Nami's smile grew brighter and she leaned over Chen Emu's ear and said, Dear guest, you must be satisfied with my service. Then, also please pay for the service of the little girl. Saying that, Nami stretched out two slender fingers towards Chen Mu. Muscles on Chen Emu's face trembled, and he said in a trembling voice, 2 million. No tilde, Nami smiled and shook her head at Chen Mu. Looking at the people who turned their heads and whistled, Chen Emu's heart sank, and he had already guessed the answer. 20 million. Chen Emu's tone was a little stiff. Looking at Nami who was about to shake her head again, Chen Mu said anxiously, I don't have 200 million. After saying that, he stood up quickly, raised his white cape at Nami, and added, Look, do I look like someone who can hide 200 million Baileys on me? Seeing Chen Emu's crying face, Nami pursed her lips, her heart softened, and she nodded lightly, a total of 25 million Baileys. Chen Mu slumped on the chair with an expression like the rest of his life. It's not that he is reluctant to give up money, he is afraid that Nami will get worse after developing this terrible habit. After all, his source of income depends entirely on the system's rewards. It seems, I'm going to learn a craft to make money, Chen Mu murmured in his heart. Then he smiled wryly and said to Nami, I put Bailey in Ah Jing's mouth, I'll go get it. After saying that, Zgu turned around and left, ignoring the light in the eyes of the girl behind him. Everyone was silent and looked down on themselves. Ellipsis. After a while, Chen Mu pretended to walk in from the outside with a bulging money bag. Nami's eyes lit up instantly, and she rushed towards Chen Mu with joy. He threw the purse into his arms. Chen Mu stood at the door awkwardly, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. At this moment, he suddenly felt that he was an outsider. The people sitting inside, drinking or chatting happily, were like family members, unlike him, who was always a passerby. Chen Mu faintly turned around and left with a bit of loneliness. The atmosphere that was supposed to be happy suddenly became quiet. Laughter stopped. Zoro looked thoughtfully at the direction Chen Mu left. Sanji wiped off the water stains on the last plate, put it aside, walked over to Luffy while wiping his hands, patted his shoulder lightly, shook his head and walked out without speaking. Everyone frowned as they watched Sanji leave, and fell into contemplation. Hey, Luffy tilde, Nami whispered to Luffy. Huh, Luffy looked back, looking at Nami suspiciously. Well, that uncle, Nami hesitated for a long time, but didn't say why. With a serious face, Robin put down the black tea in his hand and said slowly, we all think he is very easy to get along with. Robin looked at the confused Luffy and smiled. Has Luffy ever thought about making him a partner? Everyone turned their heads and looked at Luffy. Luffy was startled, scratched the back of his head, and asked, Uncle, hasn't he always been a partner? This time it was everyone's turn to be confused. When did you admit he was a partner? How do we not know? I thought you knew, Luffy asked the crowd with a soul pounding. You are the captain. If you don't tell me, how could we know that he is a partner? The crowd roared wildly in their hearts. Knew Luffy very well, covered his mouth lightly and smiled gracefully. Luffy with a look of disgust, Nami blinked her beautiful eyes like autumn water, turned around secretly, quietly wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes, and her rosy mouth Vivi curled up. Luffy is still the sweetest idiot. Sunny, on the grassy deck. Chenmu put his hands on the guardrail and looked into the distance without focus. At this time, Jinghua Shuiyu was bitten in his mouth by him. The sea breeze in the afternoon is very comfortable. Sanji's voice came from the second floor. Chenmu was stunned for a moment, turned his head, and looked at Sanji so quietly. A few seconds later, Chenmu said with a slight disgust, "Can you not smoke in the upper wind? I'm down there, I'm choking." The smile on Sanji's face froze, and the hand holding the cigarette trembled slightly. Ha 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 ha. A burst of wanton laughter came. Immediately afterwards, Zoro walked out of the room with his hands covering his stomach. Ha ha ha, stupid cook. Zoro's merciless sarcasm entered Sanji's ears. Sanji was trembling with anger, and his breathing became a little heavy. Seeing Zoro pointing at Sanji's back with one hand and laughing while covering his stomach with the other, Chenmu subconsciously took 2 steps back and muttered in his heart. This distance is too close. If the two of them fight, I'm afraid they will splatter my blood. Chenmu took a few steps back again. Finally, the unbearable Sanji burst out. "Green-headed bastard," Sanji growled. Before he finished speaking, Sanji flickered and disappeared. Immediately afterwards, the sound of strong wind whistling above Zoro's head, and Sanji's violent shout. "First-class ground meat." The smile on Zoro's face subsided, and with a sound of chang, the Chushui heavy sword was instantly unsheathed. The two went up and down, frantically, fighting each other. Ah! Yahaha! Sanji, who was in the air, kicked his feet faster and faster, turning into afterimages. Zoro below, also turned into a two-sword flow, quickly waving 2 sharp-edged swords, drawing a cold light in the air. For this reason, the corners of Chen Emu's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but complain. "When fighting the enemy, I have never seen you work so hard." The sound of fierce fighting outside drew everyone in the room out. But when everyone saw that it was Suo-shan and the two who were madly fighting, they were not surprised. After all, the two of them had a small fight every day and a big fight every 3 days, and everyone was used to it. Hey Zoro, Sanji. Luffy sat on the white railing on the second floor, shouting to the two who were fighting to the bow. Huh. When the two heard the sound, they looked at each other tacitly, tried their best to make a move, and each retreated. Humph. Stupid swordsman, cheek. Chenmu raised his eyebrows and looked at the two of them amusingly. Hey, uncle, come here. Luffy shouted at Chenmu again. Huh, me. Chenmu was taken aback. Then, follow Zoro Sanji and walk towards Luffy. Chapter 53 Renovation of White Flame and Black Pocket. On the sunny. Chenmu stood beside Luffy, together with everyone, looking at Usopp on the bow. The long sea breeze roared past, raising the black curly hair under Usopp's hat. I saw that his left eye was tightly closed, his breathing gradually became slow and long, and he was concentrating on a certain floating object in the distance. Call out. A slight cracking sound rang in the ears of everyone. Everyone stared at it and saw a small transparent hole on the wooden barrel that was floating up and down. Frankie, who was looking far into the distance, put down his right hand on his forehead, and his tone was a little puzzled, as that wooden barrel a little strange. Nami was stunned for a moment, her pretty face was full of doubts, and she said suspiciously, "Isn't it just an extra hole? Based on Usopp's accuracy, is this strange?" As he said that, he glanced at the people who were staring at him. How did you? Shish, look. Zoro looked serious, raising his chin at the barrel in the distance. Nami was stunned and followed Zoro's gaze. I saw that the wooden barrel was slowly melting at an extremely slow speed. Nami's pupils shrank, and she covered her mouth lightly, her face full of disbelief. Why, Usopp, did you secretly replace the cork with a flame seed? After a brief shock, Nami asked the calm Usopp. Usopp frowned without saying a word, still looking at the gradually melting wooden barrel. ... After a moment, the Sunny approached. Looking at the barrel with less than 1/10 of it remaining, everyone looked serious. "Go down and have a look, old man." After saying that, Jinbei jumped into the sea with a pop, and swam in the direction of the mutilated wooden barrel. Seeing Jinbei approaching the wooden barrel, Robin with a keen mind frowned slightly and pursed his lips tightly. "There is still some left, you wait, the old man will bring this back." After saying that, Jinbei gently copied his right hand and lifted the ups and downs of the mutilated wooden barrel. "Don't put it down soon." Robin shrank his pupils and hurriedly said. But still a step too late. Jinbei, who was holding the barrel aloft, threw the barrel away as if electrocuted. Then his right hand was quickly put down and dived under the sea. Jinbei's face full of pain, a hint of surprise flashed in everyone's eyes. This invisible flame can actually hurt a fish man. Jinbei. You know, most of Jinbei's skills are in these palms. Also, he can use armament for defense. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but fix their eyes on Jinbei's black right arm. Yes, Jinbei just reacted now and wanted to use armament hardening to crush this weird flame. However, what everyone saw was that Jinbei's forearm was a normal black armament, and the palm was still his original skin color. It seems, can't override armament. Everyone sighed in their hearts and looked at Chen Mu as if asking for help. Chen Mu also frowned at what happened to Jinbei. He also didn't expect that the flame that could make him feel the burning pain would be the flame of possession to others. It won't take a few minutes, and Jinbei's palm will be melted away. If it drags on for a long time, it may burn the entire arm. Zoro said softly, pulling out Chushui, as if he wanted to jump down and help Jinbei's broken arm. "Uncle." Looking at Jinbei, whose face was getting paler, Nami pulled Chen Mu's white cloak anxiously. Chen Mu couldn't tell because of the bitterness. The system didn't introduce too much about this stuff. "I can't help it either." Chen Mu shook his head with a wry smile, but before he could finish speaking, the system's voice rang. "Seastone element is detected nearby, the burning effect is weakening. You can try seastone." Chen Mu turned his head solemnly and glanced around at the crowd. Measure, given by Chen Mu. Zoro, who was about to jump into the sea, froze, and the expression on his face instantly became weird. Seeing the expressions on everyone's faces gradually become weird, Chen Mu was stunned. "What are your expressions? Aren't you the ones who are looking for a solution? Look at me, go save people." Chen Mu has a question in his head. "Big Uncle, we have 4 abilities," Chopper said timidly. "So what?" Chen Mu looked at Chopper, whose face was full of fear, and slowly spread his hands. Nami covered her eyes and said helplessly, "So every time we go to the island to purchase, we don't pay special attention to this thing." Frankie, who looked calm, also added, "Seastone. I seem to have seen it in a black market auction. Its price is very expensive, and it can almost buy half a treasure tree atom." Chen Mu. "Good guy, let's just chop off your hands." Chen Mu, who was powerless to complain, suddenly had a flash of inspiration and remembered the system's prompt. "Seastone element detected nearby." Nearby. Having figured out the key point, Chen Mu suddenly squatted down and jumped towards Jinbei, who was struggling to support him. "Jinbei, dive in!" Chen Mu shouted loudly. Jinbei only felt a thunder in his ears, and he instantly woke up with a dazed expression. At this time, Chen Mu appeared on top of Jinbei's head, spread out his left hand, and pressed him under the sea. With a puff, Chen Mu pressed Jinbei's head, dived under the sea, and headed for the deep sea. ... The two dived for a moment, and the system prompt sounded again in Chen Mu's mind. "Seastone element is detected nearby, the burning effect is weakening. It's near, it's near." Chen Mu held his breath and increased his diving speed by 1 more point. The sight around him was getting darker and darker, and it was pitch black in the end. Chen Mu knew in his heart that the depth at this time was probably more than 1,000 meters. "Ding, there are a lot of seastone elements nearby," and the burning effect is dropping sharply. Here it is, here it is. Chenmu pressed Jinbei's figure down again, and with the help of this reaction force, he quickly swam upwards. Just stay down there for a while. ... In the dark and silent deep sea, a blue-skinned fish man, with his eyes closed, sat cross-legged beside a tattered warship. Chenmu, on the other hand, was sitting in the mouth of a black giant whale. ... After a while, the giant whale surfaced and opened its mouth at the same time, revealing Chenmu, who was sitting on his knees. "Uncle!" Chopper yelled happily. "Chopper Vivi Isho!" Chenmu jumped into the sea and swam towards the Sunny. On the way to the Sunny, the scouring force of the sea washed the mucus from his body. After a short while, Chenmu climbed up the rope ladder that Frankie had put down. Luffy and the others hurriedly gathered around, their eyes full of anxiety. Seeing this, Chenmu Vivi Isho said softly, "Don't worry, it's all right." When everyone heard the words, they breathed a sigh of relief, and they trusted Chenmu's words. As the atmosphere on the boat gradually became more relaxed, Usopp rolled his eyes, put Chenmu aside, and asked quietly, "Hey, Uncle, is Jinbei really all right?" "Well, it's fine." Chenmu nodded. "Oh." Chenmu raised his brows and looked at him strangely. "How do I feel? You're not very happy to meet him." No, Uncle, don't talk nonsense. How can I Usopp be that kind of person, ha? Ha ha. Looking at Usopp with an awkward smile, Chenmu rolled his eyes and said, "Tell me, what do you want to know?" "Hee, Uncle is really good." Usopp hurriedly gave a thumbs up. After a pause, he continued, "I just want to know, this fire, is it afraid of sea stone?" Chenmu nodded. "Okay, I see." After that, Usopp walked back to the crowd with a decadent look on his face. "This guy." Chenmu shook his head and chuckled. Of course he knew what Usopp was thinking. It's nothing more than a broken dream of invincibility. ... On the other side, the dark deep sea. Jinbei opened his eyes calmly, and the moment he clenched his right hand, the black armament instantly wrapped around him. How can I be stumped by the mere flames? The fire of confidence in Jinbei's eyes ignited again. Then, he turned his head and looked around, a trace of confusion flashed in his eyes. Where is this? How am I here? What about the guy holding my head? ... Chapter 54 Preliminary Test of Yanwei. On the Sunny. Chenmu stood beside Luffy, together with everyone, looking at Usopp on the bow. The long sea breeze roared past, raising the black curly hair under Usopp's hat. I saw that his left eye was tightly closed, his breathing gradually became slow and long, and he was concentrating on a certain floating object in the distance. Call out. A slight cracking sound rang in the ears of everyone. Everyone stared at it and saw a small transparent hole on the wooden barrel that was floating up and down. Frankie, who was looking far into the distance, put down his right hand on his forehead, and his tone was a little puzzled, as that wooden barrel a little strange. Nami was stunned for a moment, her pretty face was full of doubts, and she said suspiciously, "Isn't it just an extra hole? Based on Usopp's accuracy, is this strange?" As he said that, he glanced at the people who were staring at him. "How did you?" "Shish, look." Zoro looked serious, raising his chin at the barrel in the distance. Nami was stunned and followed Zoro's gaze. I saw that the wooden barrel was slowly melting at an extremely slow speed. Nami's pupils shrank, and she covered her mouth lightly, her face full of disbelief. "Why, Usopp, did you secretly replace the cork with a flame seed?" After a brief shock, Nami asked the calm Usopp. Usopp frowned without saying a word, still looking at the gradually melting wooden barrel. ... After a moment, the Sunny approached. Looking at the barrel with less than 1/10 of it remaining, everyone looked serious. "Go down and have a look, old man." After saying that, Jinbei jumped into the sea with a pop, and swam in the direction of the mutilated wooden barrel. Seeing Jinbei approaching the wooden barrel, Robin with a keen mind frowned slightly and pursed his lips tightly. There is still some left, you wait, the old man will bring this back. After saying that, Jinbei gently copied his right hand and lifted the ups and downs of the mutilated wooden barrel. Don't put it down soon. Robin shrank his pupils and hurriedly said. But still a step too late. Jinbei, who was holding the barrel aloft, threw the barrel away as if electrocuted. Then his right hand was quickly put down and dived under the sea. Jinbei's face full of pain, a hint of surprise flashed in everyone's eyes. This invisible flame can actually hurt a fish man Jinbei. You know, most of Jinbei's skills are in these palms. Also, he can use armament for defense. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but fix their eyes on Jinbei's black right arm. Yes, Jinbei just reacted now and wanted to use armament hardening to crush this weird flame. However, what everyone saw was that Jinbei's forearm was a normal black armament, and the palm was still his original skin color. It seems, can't override armament. Everyone sighed in their hearts and looked at Chen Mu as if asking for help. Chen Mu also frowned at what happened to Jinbei. He also didn't expect that the flame that could make him feel the burning pain would be the flame of possession to others. It won't take a few minutes, and Jinbei's palm will be melted away. If it drags on for a long time, it may burn the entire arm. Zoro said softly, pulling out Chushui, as if he wanted to jump down and help Jinbei's broken arm. Uncle, looking at Jinbei, whose face was getting paler, Nami pulled Chen Mu's white cloak anxiously. Chen Mu couldn't tell because of the bitterness. The system didn't introduce too much about this stuff. I can't help it either. Chen Mu shook his head with a wry smile, but before he could finish speaking, the system's voice rang. Seastone element is detected nearby, the burning effect is weakening. You can try seastone. Chen Mu turned his head solemnly and glanced around at the crowd. Measure, given by Chen Mu. Zoro, who was about to jump into the sea, froze, and the expression on his face instantly became weird. Seeing the expressions on everyone's faces gradually become weird, Chen Mu was stunned. What are your expressions? Aren't you the ones who are looking for a solution? Look at me, go save people. Chen Mu has a question in his head. Big Uncle, we have 4 abilities, Chopper said timidly. So what? Chen Mu looked at Chopper, whose face was full of fear, and slowly spread his hands. Nami covered her eyes and said helplessly, so every time we go to the island to purchase, we don't pay special attention to this thing. Frankie, who looked calm, also added, Seastone. I seem to have seen it in a black market auction. Its price is very expensive, and it can almost buy half a treasure tree atom. Chen Mu. Good guy, let's just chop off your hands. Chen Mu, who was powerless to complain, suddenly had a flash of inspiration and remembered the system's prompt. Seastone element detected nearby. Having figured out the key point, Chen Mu suddenly squatted down and jumped towards Jinbei, who was struggling to support him. Jinbei, dive in, Chen Mu shouted loudly. Jinbei only felt a thunder in his ears, and he instantly woke up with a dazed expression. At this time, Chen Mu appeared on top of Jinbei's head, spread out his left hand, and pressed him under the sea. With a puff, Chen Mu pressed Jinbei's head, dived under the sea, and headed for the deep sea. The two dived for a moment, and the system prompt sounded again in Chen Mu's mind. Seastone element is detected nearby, the burning effect is weakening. It's near. Chen Mu held his breath and increased his diving speed by 1 more point. The sight around him was getting darker and darker, and it was pitch black in the end. Chen Mu knew in his heart that the depth at this time was probably more than 1,000 meters. Ding! There are a lot of seastone elements nearby, and the burning effect is dropping sharply. Here it is. Chen Mu pressed Jinbei's figure down again, and with the help of this reaction force, he quickly swam upwards. Just stay down there for a while. In the dark and silent deep sea, a blue-skinned fish man, with his eyes closed, sat cross-legged beside a tattered warship. Chen Mu, on the other hand, was sitting in the mouth of a black giant whale. After a while, the giant whale surfaced and opened its mouth at the same time, revealing Chen Mu, who was sitting on his knees. "Uncle!" Chopper yelled happily. "Chopper Vivi Isho!" Chen Mu jumped into the sea and swam towards the Sunny. On the way to the Sunny, the scouring force of the sea washed the mucus from his body. After a short while, Chen Mu climbed up the rope ladder that Frankie had put down. Luffy and the others hurriedly gathered around, their eyes full of anxiety. Seeing this, Chen Mu Vivi Isho said softly, "Don't worry, it's all right." When everyone heard the words, they breathed a sigh of relief, and they trusted Chen Mu's words. As the atmosphere on the boat gradually became more relaxed, Usopp rolled his eyes, put Chen Mu aside, and asked quietly, "Hey, Uncle, is Jinbei really all right?" "Well, it's fine." Chen Mu nodded. "Oh." Chen Mu raised his brows and looked at him strangely. "How do I feel? You're not very happy to meet him." No, Uncle, don't talk nonsense. How can I Usopp be that kind of person, ha? Ha ha. Looking at Usopp with an awkward smile, Chen Mu rolled his eyes and said, "Tell me, what do you want to know?" "Hee, Uncle is really good." Usopp hurriedly gave a thumbs up. After a pause, he continued, "I just want to know, this fire, is it afraid of sea stone?" Chen Mu nodded. "Okay, I see." After that, Usopp walked back to the crowd with a decadent look on his face. "This guy." Chen Mu shook his head and chuckled. Of course he knew what Usopp was thinking. It's nothing more than a broken dream of invincibility. On the other side, the dark deep sea. Jinbei opened his eyes calmly, and the moment he clenched his right hand, the black armament instantly wrapped around him. How can I be stumped by the mere flames? The fire of confidence in Jinbei's eyes ignited again. Then, he turned his head and looked around, a trace of confusion flashed in his eyes. Where is this? How am I here? What about the guy holding my head? Chapter 55 The Magic Weather Stick Transformation Failed. With a crashing sound, Jinbei broke through the sea and swam to the Sunny calmly. Sanji, who was standing still beside the boat, saw Jinbei approaching. He let out a smoke ring, then hooked and kicked with his left foot, and dropped the rope ladder down. Jinbei climbed onto the boat and looked at the unbelievable picture, and couldn't help shaking his eyebrows. I saw Luffy and the others, their eyes glowing brightly, and their faces surrounded Usopp with excitement. Usopp, on the other hand, held his right hand high, holding the black pocket slingshot tightly in his palm, with a proud and smug look on his face, like a nouveau riche. A small group of people on the other side seemed to be arguing about something, with a red face. Chen Mu, who was in the middle of the crowd, smiled awkwardly, looking like a peacemaker. Two, please listen to me. Chen Mu resignedly separated the two. Zoro and Frankie turned their heads one after another, looking at Chen Mu impatiently. Hey, my dear, is it so impatient to ask for help? Chen Mu's forehead is covered with black lines. Seeing the two of them look at him, Chen Mu coughed lightly, and said, the small part of the remaining material is only enough for one person's weapon to be transformed, so. Hearing this, everyone on the boat stopped their movements and pricked up their ears. So what? The two asked with a hunch, frowning. So, why can't I use it for myself? I also have weapons. After saying that, Chen Mu raised his left hand and waved at the two of them, flashing a cold sword light, and flashing the two of them's faces. Seeing this, Zoro and Frankie looked at each other, then bowed their heads tacitly, and fell into contemplation. Chen Mu raised his brows and looked at the two of them in surprise, thinking. It seems that the two of them still have no intention of giving up. Etc. Something seems wrong. Everything and technology are mine. If I don't get it for you, do you still want to use force against me? Thinking of this, Chen Yu couldn't help but laugh a little. These two. It seems that they can't break his defense at all. After a while, Zoro and Frankie sat on both sides with displeased faces. Right in the middle of the two, stood a little beauty who bulged forward and backward. Really, One Piece, King of Pirates Nami. Uncle, are you really going to help me transform the weather? Nami's eyes lit up with little stars. Chen Yu lowered his head slightly, a faint isho. Yeah, I know that uncle is the best. Nami jumped up excitedly and hugged Chen Mu's neck tightly. Then, as if feeling a little inappropriate, she let go of her hand with a slightly red face, and took a half step back. Then, that uncle, he wouldn't ask me for Bailey, would he? When it comes to Bailey, Nami's state has changed in an instant, with a pitiful look, and there seems to be tears in her watery eyes. Chen Mu's mouth twitched. No, I don't lack Bailey. Chen Mu's heart softened and he blurted out. Looking at Nami's beautiful eyes, a light called, money, lit up. Chen Mu subconsciously took a few steps back and secretly said something bad. Oops, I said the wrong thing. Seeing Chen Mu's reaction, Nami's eyes rolled, and her whole body suddenly became twisted, and she said in a milky voice, then. That uncle will let me keep these unimportant things ... After saying that, she pursed her lips, looking like she was about to cry. Quote. The corners of Chen Mu's eyes twitched, not knowing how to refute this pretty girl. Robin, who was watching the play, covered his mouth and chuckled. Nami, get up, he should agree. Chen Mu was startled and looked at Robin in disbelief. Sister Robin, you have changed, and your heart has become black. Chen Mu then reacted and waved to Nami in a hurry, wanting to save one last time, but Nami, who is quick-eyed and quick-handed, came first, jumped up in an instant, and hugged Chen Mu's right hand tightly. Chen Mu glanced down and looked at his forearm. He was deeply immersed in the two groups of white flesh. He couldn't help swallowing his saliva, but his mouth was dry. Uncle ... Nami hugged Chen Mu's right hand, looking like letting you pick it. Chen Mu forcibly controlled himself to look away, took a few breaths of air, and forcibly calmed down his excited mood. Okay, I'll give it to you, you put my hand first. Before Chen Mu finished speaking, he only felt that his arms were empty, the feeling of warm and fragrant nephrite had disappeared, and his heart could not help but feel a little empty. Looking at the joyful Nami, everyone vivi isho. Except for the jealous Sanji. After a while, Chen Mu took the magic weather stick and pretended to jump into the big mouth of the whale. Strengthening the light flashed, and the remaining half of the burning stone completely disappeared. Simple and boring reinforcement, once again successful. The giant mouth opened, Chen Mu held a stick in one hand and a knife in the other, and jumped on the Sunny. As long as he sees the boat, Chen Mu will always subconsciously take out the Zanpakuto, which seems to have become a habit. Chen Mu gently floated down and landed on the green lawn. Seeing the hopeful light in Nami's eyes, Chen Mu vivi isho stretched out his right hand and handed over the magic weather stick. Nami's eyes flashed, and she took the magic weather stick in her hand and looked at it carefully. Uncle, why didn't see that flame, Nami said pitifully with a small mouth. Hearing this, Chen Mu was also taken aback. After the strengthening was successful, he also jumped out in a hurry, without taking a close look. After all, Ajing's mouth is black and sticky, and the comfort is not generally bad. After thinking for a while, Chen Mu pondered, you try bubbles. A trace of confusion flashed in Nami's eyes, and she nodded blankly. With a boo sound, a reddish bubble emitting hot air flew out from one end of the magic weather wand. Then what? Everyone quietly took a step back, then looked away from the bubble and locked on Chen Mu. When did these guys become so timid? Chen Mu secretly pouted. Rubber pistol, Luffy's soft shout rang in everyone's ears. Then, everyone turned their heads to look. I saw an arm quickly stretched out, and the black armament hockey was also wrapped around the fist that flew at high speed. Call out. Bo tilde. The hot bubble was broken by a black fist, and the frenzied aura spread to the surroundings instantly. Luffy! Everyone exclaimed and retreated frantically. He he he. Luffy laughed heartlessly. Different from the retreating crowd, Chenmu frowned slightly, took a step forward, and entered the shrouded range of the heat wave. This temperature is not right. Standing in the pale red heat wave, Chenmu pondered secretly. Everyone looked at each other. Luffy, do you feel hot? Usopp whispered, bumping Luffy beside him with his elbow. Hot. Luffy tilted his head. Quote. Everyone was speechless, and Kwandang didn't ask. Nami Vivi pursed her lips, and after a brief struggle, she slowly put her fingers into the reddish mist. It's so hot. Nami retracted her fingers like lightning and blew hard. Chopper! Sanji shouted solemnly. Oh, it's coming. Chopper responded hastily. Afterwards, he was hugged by Sanji and squeezed in front of Nami. How is it, Chopper? Sanji's voice was a little hurried and seemed rather nervous. It's just a normal scald. Nami is fine. Chopper checked it carefully, took out a green ointment from the small bag behind him, and smeared it lightly. That's good. Sanji's voice was still low. Hey, Chopper. A rather helpless voice sounded. Chopper turned his head and looked at Usopp, whose face was speechless, waiting for his next words. Hey, Nami is fine, but Sanji. After that, Usopp pointed to Sanji behind Chopper. Huh, Sanji. Chopper was startled. Looking at Sanji's nosebleeds, Chopper exclaimed, Doctor, where is the doctor? There are patients who need treatment here. After a pause, he suddenly realized, I'm a doctor. Everyone. Then everyone stepped back to make room for Sanji. Living up to expectations, Sanji slowly fell down with a smile on his face. The white shirt has been dyed red. In a noisy atmosphere, a new round of treatment began. Chapter 56 Almost Extinct Red Heat. Who tilde Sanji is out of danger. Chopper wiped his sweat and sat down. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that Sanji is out of danger, Nami turns her attention back to the new, failed to transform, magical weather bar. Nami pursed her lips and walked towards Chenmu. Uncle, Nami said aggrievedly. Vivi twitched at the corner of Chenmu's mouth, and nodded awkwardly. Isn't my weather great? It's not what you think. You listen to me first. Chenmu looked at Nami cautiously, watching the tears swirling in her eyes. There was no tendency to fall, and he was secretly relieved. Immediately, he said softly, Nami, I think, because there is only one bubble, it can't be effective. Hearing this, Nami's face stiffened, and then her eyes gradually lit up. I'll try it now, Nami said excitedly. Then, he hurried to the bow of the boat, pointed to the sky, and shouted, hot bubbles. Electric bubbles. There were two soft sounds of boo, and two bubbles of different colors emerged one after another from one end of the weather bar. The crowd held their heads high and waited with bated breath. For a time, the atmosphere was as quiet as death. With a click sound, the electric bubble exploded the moment it touched the thermal bubble. Everyone retreated behind Chenmu, looking cautiously at the gradually expanding pale red bubble. Gulong tilde. Someone's Adam's apple throbbed, and he swallowed with difficulty. Aware of Usopp's fear, Chenmu shook his head and laughed in his heart. A violent explosion sounded, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone saw that the light red bubble, which was originally only the size of a basketball, exploded after it expanded to a diameter of 1 meter. Pale red ripples spread rapidly in the air, covering a radius of 100 meters, all covered by heat. Although the ripples are only on top of everyone's heads and spread out horizontally. But the intense high temperature made it very uncomfortable to bake everyone on the boat. Under this high temperature, the grass withered, the leaves quickly withered and yellowed, and even the yellow oranges were instantly shriveled and fell off one after another. Everyone's faces slowly turned ashen, as if someone had strangled their throats. Chenmu also took a breath, and his pupils shrunk instantly. This air wave actually burned the surrounding air out. And Nami, who was closest to the heat wave, had already passed out. "Jump into the sea," Chenmu shouted. Then, he quickly ran up the long ladder, picked up Nami, and jumped off the bow. Everyone jumped into the sea one after another. For a time, there was an endless stream of puffing sounds. Ellipsis. The people floating on the sea were still having difficulty breathing. Except for the 4 capable people, even Jinbei under the water began to show signs of dizziness. "No, there's still no oxygen, uncle." Usopp clutched his throat and hissed. Without Usopp's reminder, Chenmu had already noticed it. But, even if it is him, in the absence of a prompt from the system, there is still no way. Just when everyone was at a loss, preparing to swim to the range of air waves that troubled to a kilometer in diameter, a huge ocean current rushed into the sky in an instant. Ocean current, over the shoulder fall. Jinbei, who took a deep breath at the bottom of the water, quickly moved the seawater and crashed into the reddish air waves in the air. For a time, the sound of chi-chi was heard, and a large amount of seawater was quickly evaporated into white water vapor. It was these slowly rising white vapors that gave everyone a breathing space. Although the air would also burn their lungs, it was better than lack of oxygen. "Jinbei, do it again, send everyone on the boat." Chenmu groaned. Then he turned his head and said to Frankie, after getting on the boat, "Prepare for the wind to burst as soon as possible." Frankie was stunned for a moment, and there was a hint of doubt in Chenmu's eyes. "The wind will burst and the sunny will be pushed into the air. Wouldn't that be closer to the intense red heat? Don't worry about it so much, or everyone will die here." Chenmu scolded. Immediately, he said, "I will say that a large amount of seawater is blasted into the air, and everyone should be careful to be scalded by the steam." "Uncle, won't you come with us?" Sanji's pupils dilated and his voice was a little hurried. "You go first, I won't be in danger," Chenmu said firmly. "Get ready to get on the boat." Chenmu handed Nami into Frankie's hands with a heavy tone. Boom tilde. The seawater fluctuated violently, and then rolled the crowd and rushed into the air. As the momentum of the sea stagnated, everyone gradually began to descend from the air. Dang, 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 all landed on the boat one after another. "Sanji, I'll leave it to you." Frankie put Nami Robin down and quickly ran to the control room. Rumbling tilde. The wall of giant waves, several times larger than the waves created by Jinbei, quickly rushed into the sky. For a while, everyone who was still on the board was covered in white steam as far as they could see. Zoro was the first to react and shouted, "Go!" With Luffy and Brook tucked under his arm, and then biting into Chopper's backpack, he rushed into the first-floor cabin. Usopp, Jinbei, and everyone who was in a coma on their backs followed closely. Ellipsis. With a loud bang, the Sunny rushed into the white steam. The wind burst also needs to inhale air to start it. If the white vapor is dissipated, the wind burst cannot be started normally. The violent wind howled, and the Sunny, carrying the crowd, quickly broke through the air. Chenmu floated on the sea, his cheeks flushed. Glancing at the little lion sailboat that had broken through the air, his eyes instantly became extremely firm. The clenched right fist was quickly blasted out after a short charge. Boom! A wave more violent than before, quickly rushed into the sky. The height of the huge wave set off this time even exceeded the reddish heat breath. The collision between the seawater and the high-altitude heat source quickly produced a large amount of steam. The sea area where Chenmu was located suddenly turned white. Alas, if it wasn't for the fear of shattering the Sunny, I would have long ago. Chenmu sighed in his heart. Then he shook his head, threw the distracting thoughts out of his mind, and swam in the direction of the Sunny. After a while, Chenmu saw the Sunny parked on the sea, and a huge whale floating beside it. Ah Whale groaned softly and was extremely happy. Hearing Ah Jing's soft moan, everyone hurried to the stern and saw Chen Mu, who was approaching quickly. Frankie, put down the boat. Nami, who was pale, put her hands on the edge of the boat and whispered to Frankie behind her. Frankie nodded heavily, then ran to the control room. Hey, Uncle, Luffy waved to Chen Mu with a smile on his face. Chen Mu was stunned and couldn't help sighing. As expected of the protagonist, he was soaked by seawater and inhaled high-temperature air. In such a short period of time, he seemed to be nothing. Watching Chen Mu board the boat, Sanji turned his back and lit a cigarette. Zoro, on the other hand, squinted slightly, staring at Chen Mu's left hand. Chapter 57 The Sunken Seastone Warship. After a while, Chen Mu took the Mini Mary No. 2 and entered the exclusive dock from the No. 2 wicket. Enter the dock and, with the help of Frankie, successfully secure the 4-person steam shopping boat. Then, with one hand, he jumped out. This small Mary is quite. Chen Mu's tone choked and stopped abruptly. Sensing the sudden interruption of the words of the person behind him, Frankie turned around curiously. I saw Chen Mu standing stiffly in the same place, with a pale face and a shaky look. What's wrong with you? Frankie asked subconsciously, frowning. Then, I suddenly remembered that the pale-faced man in front of him seemed to have serious seasickness. Hey Chopper, there's a patient here. Frankie called out, putting his right hand to his mouth. Ah, okay I'll come down. Hearing Chopper's characteristic footsteps from far to near, Chen Mu's forehead was covered with black lines. One by one, more excited than myself. With a flash of white light, the cyan hilt instantly appeared in the left hand, and the gleaming blade of the cold light also flashed a misty brilliance, and then instantly converged, as if nothing had happened. I'm here, where is the patient, where is the patient? Chopper ran to the two of them and asked anxiously. Frankie turned his head and pointed his right hand at Chen Mu. Huh. Looking at Chen Mu's face as usual, Frankie opened his mouth wide and looked at him with a confused look. On the other hand, Chen Mu glanced at Frankie lightly, and walked towards the stairs with a calm expression. Passing by Chopper, he took advantage of the opportunity to pick up the group pet with a question mark face, put it on his shoulder, and left the small dock together. Leaving Frankie with a confused face, doubting life alone. ... With the sound of stepping on the stairs, Chen Mu pushed open the small wooden door on the first floor and appeared on the deck. At this time, Nami had returned to the girls' dormitory on the second floor and went to rest. If it weren't for choosing a route and waiting for Chen Mu's return, she would not have forced her to come to the bow. After all, at the moment when the heat burst out, she was the first to bear the brunt. Under that heat, even Chen Mu felt that his throat was on fire, let alone other people. Walking out of the door, feeling the comfortable warm sun, I couldn't help stretching and said with a happy face. It's really comfortable. Ha ha. A pleasant chuckle came down from above Chen Mu. Chen Mu took 2 steps forward, then turned to look. I saw Robin on the second floor, wearing a white towel, leaning lightly on the guardrail, drinking steaming afternoon tea. The aroma of tea is overflowing. Chen Mu swallowed and stared at the white teacup that Robin was holding on his chest, and said without looking back, Sanji, bring me a cup of tea too. Ha tilde. Sanji raised his head and exhaled a faint ring of smoke, pretending not to hear. Waiting for Sanji's reply, Chen Mu didn't care, still staring at the white flower teacup on Robin's chest. This teacup is really white. When Chen Mu was still thinking about it, a heavy cough came into his ears. Cough, that, just now, the old man found a tattered warship on the bottom of the sea, and these things were scattered around. After saying that, Jinbei stretched out his right palm towards Chen Mu, who was expressionless, revealing a few broken stones. Chen Mu did not speak, and stared at him quietly with those emotionless eyes. Jinbei raised his eyebrows with a puzzled look, a little puzzled. Is there something on my face? Just when the two looked at each other awkwardly, Robin on the second floor let out a soft cry. This is sea stone. Then, in order to verify the thoughts in my heart, I performed a round of blooming. I saw a pair of white lotus-shaped arms growing out of Jinbei's shoulders and pointing towards the light blue stones. Tilda. Robin groaned softly, leaning on the white guardrail, unable to sit down. Then, he took 2 breaths and said softly, yes, this is sea stone. Seeing that Robin tried, to confirm the truth, everyone on the boat's eyes flashed, and looked at Jinbei cautiously. Where did you get this sea stone from? Chen Mu narrowed his eyes slightly, his tone slightly dark. Jinbei looked back at him quietly, not answering. At this moment, Sanji jumped over from the bow of the boat. First, he glanced at Robin with a worried expression, and after seeing his Vivi shaking his head, he solemnly looked at the blue stone in Jinbei's hand. This stone, is it from that warship? Sanji frowned, his voice a little low. Jinbei glanced at Sanji and nodded slightly. Could it be the sea stone at the bottom of the warship? Chen Mu seemed to have thought of something and asked. Jinbei didn't stay silent this time, shook his head and said, I don't know either. For a while, the atmosphere on the ship instantly quieted down. The crowd fell into deep thought. Recalled all the several battles of Vice Admiral Marine in his mind. Wrong. Marine is able to traverse the calm zone and avoid Sea King attacks, relying on the sea stone on the bottom of the ship, which is also the result of Vegapunk. With the means of this advanced scientist, these inlaid sea stones would never fall off so easily. Moreover, judging from the major battles, there are not a few warships that have been sunk. It seems that no one has ever paid attention to these warships. Warships can easily cross the windless zone and enter the New World. This technology, as long as a pirate with a normal mind, should be curious. Therefore, there is a high probability that these sea stones will not fall from the bottom of the boat. Since it's not from the bottom of the boat, it can only be. Thinking of this, Chen Mu's pupils shrank suddenly, and said to Sanji who was holding a pointer. Quick, turn around and go back, that warship is transporting sea stone. Everyone was stunned for a moment, and then, one by one, their breathing became rapid. At this time, with a bang, the door on the second floor was violently pushed open. Nami, who was pale, clenched the doorknob with her right hand, and stubbornness money flashed in her eyes. Listen to Uncle, hurry up, turn around quickly. The voice was very urgent. Frankie, you go to the control room, immediately start the wind to burst, and leave the steering to Jinbei. Nami continued to give orders. Frankie paused in his running posture, then turned around without hesitation and ran to the door on the first floor. At this time, Jinbei stretched out his hand stupidly. Jinbei, if you don't take the helm, Nami will go crazy. Chen Mu blinked at Jinbei and said with a weird smile. Ah, oh. Jinbei turned around stupidly and ran to the stairs connecting to the bow. After running for a while, Jinbei came to the bow, held the circular steering wheel tightly with both hands, and made several laps to the right. With Jinbei's movements, the direction of the Sunny's going changed suddenly, and after slowly making a circle, the bow of the ship was aligned with the direction it came from. Fang, the direction is fine. Jinbei suddenly stuttered for some reason. Okay, Frankie, start the blaster. You're mistaken, we're not coming this way, we're coming over there. Zoro looked serious and pointed his left hand in the other direction. The corners of Chen Mu's mouth twitched, and he thought to himself, do you have some knowledge in your own mind? Don't be ashamed of your sense of direction. Sure enough, the corners of Nami's eyes twitched wildly, looking at Zoro with an angry face, and shouted, Zoro, don't talk. Frankie, activate the wind cannon. Nami Zhao shouted. Wind, come, burst, crack. Frankie's high-pitched voice sounded in everyone's ears. Then, with a bang sound, the Sunny took a violent wind and flew in the direction it came from. Fortunately, The red-hot breath was neutralized by the wave of Chen Mu's shock, otherwise, they would not dare to look back. Even if Nami is greedy for money, she still has to worry about the personal safety of her friends. After all, she is a navigator on the ship, and her duty is to send everyone safely to the next destination. Chapter 58 Shark 3 debuts. Under the soft sunlight, a two-masted sailboat with a lion's head was breaking through the air. With the rapid whistling of the wind, it was quickly smashing into the sea. Bang tilde. This medium-sized sailboat with dozens of people fell on the sea, causing a wave wall dozens of meters high. As the swaying Sunny gradually stabilized, everyone slowly climbed up from the board. Nami covered her head, her face even paler. Nami, you haven't recovered yet, hurry back and rest. Chopper, with a worried face, patted Nami's straight and slender thighs lightly. Well, wait for me, I'll finish it soon. Nami shook her head stubbornly. Afterwards, he stood up with the help of the white guardrail and said to Chen Mu, who was swaying, Uncle, about the location of that warship, I'll leave it to you. And Jinbei. Chen Mu raised his head a little stiffly and blinked his eyes forcefully, indicating that there was no problem. Nami smiled wearily, turned and walked into the room, followed by Chopper. At this time, Frankie also pushed open the door and walked out. For a time, everyone on the deck looked at Chen Mu in unison. On the one hand, he was expecting him to point out a specific direction, and on the other hand, he was secretly amazed. I was amazed how he dispelled the terrifying heat that enveloped a kilometer in a short period of time. It is estimated that Marine Admiral, No, Kuzan, who is the current Marine Marshal, may be able to do it reluctantly. However, that Marine Marshal is capable. He won't, just rely on this body. Thinking of this, everyone suddenly became dumbfounded, and there was a hint of disbelief in their eyes. Chen Mu glanced at everyone indifferently, without speculating on their thoughts, he pointed in a certain direction. Seeing Chen Mu pointing out the direction, everyone quickly dispelled the distracting thoughts in their minds, and there was a hint of impatient excitement in their eyes. Frankie hurriedly ran to the long ladder leading to the bow, and only then did he remember halfway. Is the current helmsman me? That guy Jinbei? Thinking of this, Frankie turned around quickly, facing Jinbei's back, and shouted loudly. Hey tilde, Jinbei tilde tilde tilde, now you are at the helm. Jinbei, who was in deep thought, had a look on his face, turned around with a little doubt, pointed to his nose, and said in a confused tone. Me. Ah, that's right, it's you. Frankie grinned isho, showing his snow-white teeth and even reflecting a harsh white light. Everyone was caught by this confident smile, and hurriedly turned their heads away. At this time, Jinbei, with a confused face, walked towards the long ladder. At this moment, Chen Mu rubbed his nearly blinded eyes, and said in a calm tone, this time it won't work, we still need Jinbei to go into the water to confirm the location of the sunken ship. Everyone was stunned and looked at Chen Mu with a puzzled expression. Are you pointing in this direction? Looking at everyone's questioning eyes, Chen Mu rolled his eyes and couldn't help but slander. Do you think I am a god? How can I remember the exact location? This is the sea. Afterwards, Chen Mu ignored the dazed crowd and walked to the second floor on his own, leaving a handsome back to everyone. The location of the wreck is right here. The water is too dark, I can't see it. Let Jinbei find it. After speaking, Chen Mu closed the door on the second floor with a bang, and disappeared in front of everyone. Everyone looked at each other, and then they all locked their eyes on Jinbei. Jinbei was a little dazed by everyone's stares, and took a step back subconsciously. At this moment, Sanji lightly flicked the exhausted cigarettes, and walked towards the second floor, saying as he walked, I'll go make a pot of tea, and the shipwreck will be handed over to you, Jinbei. Oops, before you know it, it's exercise time again, then, the task of sinking the ship is up to you, Jinbei. That, Zoro patted Jinbei on the shoulder, yawned and left. I'm going to help Chopper. Usopp just opened his mouth when Jinbei turned his head and gave him a stern tone. Immediately, he put his right hand on his forehead, and said in an extremely weak tone, "I may have a disease that makes me faint when I hit the sea." Having said that, he pretended to be about to fall and sit down, but was helped by Frankie, who suddenly appeared beside him. "We can go down to the submarine." Frankie gave the thumbs up again. Submarine. Usopp and Jinbei froze for a moment, looking at Frankie with a confident smile. "Super. Sunny, but everything, you go to the waiting room first, and I'll open the third dock. You can take 3 people. Frankie turned his back to the crowd and compared 3, and then walked to the control room without any hesitation. Hearing this, Luffy's eyes immediately lit up, and he raised his hand and said, "Hee, let me go with Usopp Jinbei." Hearing Luffy's voice, Frankie's body froze suddenly, and then he sighed. "Hey, you are the captain, you have the final say." Immediately, he said, "Then let Usopp control the little shark, and I can rest assured." "No problem," Luffy agreed. After a while, the small gate of Channel 3 rose, and a submarine shaped like a blue shark drove out from the small gate, and then slowly sank into the sea. Inside the submarine, Luffy Jinbei sat in the back row, while Usopp sat alone in the front row. Because this small submarine has only one pilot seat. Just when everyone was amazed, the phone bug on the right side of the console suddenly rang. Usopp put down the grip in his hand and reached out to pick up the phone. "Hello." Usopp was interrupted by the person on the other end of the phone. "Super. Usopp, isn't Sunny's Shark 3 great? Hey, can you hear Luffy, isn't he handsome?" Frankie's very excited voice came from the other end of the phone, and immediately rang through the entire submarine. "Oh who, Frankie, he's so handsome." Luffy's eyes lit up as he squeezed in from the back seat. Luffy, go back now, I can't breathe." Usopp's eyes turned white, and his panicked hands fluttered in the air. Usopp, the #1 cautious character of the Straw Hats, buckled his seatbelt first after getting on the boat. Little did Luffy pounce directly from the back seat, nearly having him strangled by a safety belt on the spot. "Huh." Luffy smiled and looked at Usopp under him with some doubts. Fortunately, Jinbei responded in time, grabbed Luffy's arm, and dragged him back, otherwise, their driver, Comrade Xiaowu, would have burped on the spot. It was also because of Jinbei's timely action that Usopp, who almost fainted, got a chance to breathe and took a deep breath. Anxious voice of Chopper on the other end of the phone. Usopp, are you all right? You must not die, I can't bear you." As he spoke, he choked up. Usopp's forehead was covered with black lines, rolled his eyes, and said, "I'm not dead, I can still breathe heavily now." "Oh, that's good, then I'll go." Chopper's slightly crying voice suddenly subsided, and his tone instantly calmed down, and then disappeared on the other end of the phone with its unique footsteps. Chopper went bad, must have learned from the Zoro guy. Usopp groaned in his heart, and quickly turned Chopper's face into the pot, and threw it directly on Zoro's head. Ah! Sneeze. Someone who was exercising suddenly sneezed. Chapter 59 Deep Sea Workers. 1,000 meters under the sea. In the dim deep sea, a blue shark submarine shot 2 yellow lights from its eyes and moved slowly. After walking slowly for a while, Usopp drove the Shark 3 to a stop, and the dim yellow light suddenly shone on the rust-covered hull of the warship. Inside the submarine. "Is it this warship?" Usopp turned his head and looked at Jinbei. Through the glass in front, Jinbei also saw the tattered warship under the beam. After thinking for a while, Jinbei said with a serious expression, "Go down and have a look, old man." Soon as he finished speaking, Jinbei raised his hands directly, propped up the round hatch above his head, and was about to push the door out. Stop, don't open it there, or we will die," Usopp hurriedly shouted. Hearing Usopp's anxious voice, Jinbei opened the door with a pause, turned his head, and said with a confused expression, How does the old man get out? At this moment, a small speaker located in the upper left corner of the console rang. Usopp, press that red button. Frankie's voice came from the speaker. Usopp looked left and right, then locked his eyes on the speaker in the upper left corner, and asked suspiciously. Frankie, you've been spying on us. I didn't, Gulong tilde. Frankie's calm voice came from the speaker again, and at the same time, there was a very strange voice. Why is this sound so familiar? You're drinking Coke while peeking at us. Usopp frowned and asked suspiciously. I didn't, hiccup tilde. Frankie denied again. Hearing the hiccup, Usopp suddenly understood. This guy is lying. Hey, we're making money to support our family in the unknown deep sea. How about you, lying in the monitoring room, watching the show, and drinking Coke? Usopp's forehead throbbed with blue veins. Looks like you've found the warship, so don't drag it anymore. Press that red button and the rear hatch will open. Obviously, Frankie has a guilty conscience, but after 2 years of further study in the future country, he is no longer the boring boy in underwear, and now he can change the topic skillfully. Usopp is also aware of the importance, and even lowered his head and looked at the full red buttons. You are all red buttons. How do I know which one? The corners of Usopp's eyes twitched wildly, and he couldn't hold back the anger in his heart, and roared loudly at the loudspeaker. Luffy and Jinbei cleaned their ears in unison, looking a little bored. Frankie, who was on the other end of the phone, didn't come out of nowhere after a long while. This time, Usopp couldn't sit still. He immediately unbuttoned the safety buckle, stood on the chair, and roared frantically with the loudspeaker above his head. Don't tell me you forgot. Otherwise, I will fight with you when I go up. To mention, Usopp's roar does have some effect, at least. No more, sounds. For a while, the atmosphere became extremely quiet. After a few seconds of silence, Frankie's voice came out from the speaker again. Gulong, ah, cola is so delicious tilde. Frankie sighed comfortably. Then, the atmosphere at this time sounded a little out of place, and immediately changed his tune and said, I mean, there is a special pattern on that button, which is a human face with a long nose. A face with a long nose. Usopp was taken aback, always feeling that something was wrong. But considering his own situation, he stopped thinking about it and pressed the special button directly. With a puff sound, as if the air valve had been opened, the 2-meter-high rear hatch completely fell. Fortunately, a layer of bubbles appeared in time, and the sea water was blocked outside. Super. Bubble shark farts. Frankie's screams suddenly came from the loudspeaker, which startled Usopp, who was engrossed in it. Shut up for me. Usopp jumped up in exasperation, raised his knife, and slashed several times into the speaker. After a short vent, Usopp panted heavily, looked at Jinbei and said, the next thing is up to you, Jinbei. Well, rap it on the old man. Jinbei nodded solemnly. There is a red button with antlers in the upper left corner. Press it to launch the fishing net. The horn sounded again. Well, I see. Usopp drooped his eyelids and responded lightly. Just as the trio at the bottom of the sea was carrying out the salvage work in full swing, at the end of the line between the sea and the sky, several huge ship shadows appeared. ... Look out interior. Zoro had a warning sign in his heart, put down the barbell stacked with 10 huge discus, and walked abruptly to the window, staring at it. This is marine. Zoro frowned and picked up the phone bug beside him. Hey, can you hear it? Can you hear it? Zoro's voice, through the loudspeaker, spread throughout the ship, and everyone put down their movements at the same time and began to listen intently. Hey, Cook, there's marine here, can you hear it? Zoro waited for a few seconds. Seeing that there was still no sound coming from the phone bug, he casually threw the phone away and left with disgust. The observation room. Walking, he muttered, why put a rotten phone bug here? No, I will discuss it with Nami later, and buy a new one after going to the island. Unknowingly, his voice had spread throughout the ship, especially Sanji in the kitchen, who was trembling with anger, and even dropped the spoon in his hand to the ground. This green-headed bastard. Sanji gritted his teeth. Different from the runaway Sanji, the rest of the people on the boat came to the deck with serious expressions. Looking at the warships that were gradually approaching, everyone frowned and prepared for battle. On the other side, on the most central warship, a silver-haired man with a cigar in his mouth and a big back, slowly put down the monocular in his hand, and said calmly, "It's the Straw Hat Pirates." Oh, Akainu, standing beside Smoker, raised his eyebrows in surprise. Then, with a sneer, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Let's go by." "Yes," a soldier replied respectfully. Soon after, the group of warships marked with G5 slowly surrounded the Sunny in the center. Smoker folded his arms grimly, and glanced lightly at the Sunny below. "Long time no see, everyone." "It's him." Sanji frowned and his tone became a little heavy. "No, look behind him, there is a figure." Nami, who was standing on the second floor, exclaimed. Because the huge warship was too close to block the sunlight, everyone couldn't see the figure behind Smoker for a while. He, let me find it anyway." With a sneer, Akainu crossed the Smoker and stood in front of everyone. "Yes, Marine Admiral." Nami's pupils shrank suddenly, and she took a step back subconsciously. "Oh, are you the navigator of the Straw Hat Pirates?" Akainu raised his brows and looked at Nami, who was pale. Pause, he continued. "Obviously, he has an extremely amazing sailing talent, but he chose to help these hateful pirates." Akainu took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Nami, and the expression on his face gradually became fierce. "It is like a wicked tiger rushing towards its prey." "No, it's a vicious dog." By Akainu Morihan's gaze, Nami trembled uncontrollably, her beautiful eyes widened, and Akainu's extremely frightening figure was reflected in her eyes. As her pupils kept dilating, Nami trembled even more, and in the end, she sat down directly and hugged her head tightly. "No, I'm not wrong," and the like. Akainu alone, Nami is clearly on the verge of collapse. "Nami." Everyone looked anxious. In this deadly atmosphere, a figure jumped up instantly and appeared on the second floor. Sanji's body was full of manic aura, and that was not a generous back, but it gave Nami a full sense of security. Actually, he is the one, the knight who truly protects the princess. Sanji. Nami raised her head slowly, tears flashing in her beautiful eyes. "Don't worry, I won't let anyone hurt you." Sanji turned his head, Isho gently towards Nami. "Huh, is it?" Akainu sneered disdainfully, then turned his eyes away, scanning back and forth among the people below. "After looking at it for a long time, I found that the most important, that person, did not appear in it, so I could not help but breathe a sigh of relief." Then, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and he sneered, "Your captain, where is the Straw Hat Boy?" "Ah, our captain has something to do." Zoro looked at Akainu calmly, and responded indifferently. Then the three knives were unsheathed, and the words Hidao on the white hilt were bitten into their mouths. Chu Shui Guiche held each hand, and the black armament breath quickly entangled. When the captain was away, as a fighter, he naturally wanted to be the first to rush forward to meet the enemy. Seeing Zoro drawing his sword, everyone took out their weapons one after another, ready to fight at any time. Seeing everyone's face like an enemy, Smoker grinned and sneered, "Are you going to fight? I've been waiting for this moment for a long time." Speaking, Smoker had already jumped out of the warship, holding 10 hands high, smashing towards Zoro below. The attack was swift and violent, and Zoro was unequivocal, holding his two swords horizontally and bucking the trend. Clang tilde tilde tilde. The deafening sound of gold and iron sounded, reaching everyone's ears. As for Zoro and Smoker, they didn't fight. Zoro had a solemn expression, half bowed, slipped a few meters backwards, and plowed the green lawn into 2 shallow ravines. And Smoker, also by the power of the shock, floated in the air. Ha ha, that's kind of interesting. Smoker grinned Isho, spitting out a thick ring of smoke. Then, with a sneer, he was about to pounce again. However, a crisp female voice entered his ears. Smoker Vice Admiral, please give me this enemy. Smoker was stunned for a moment, looked at Tashigi who jumped down, then nodded helplessly, and fell to the bow of the Sunny. Tashigi landed on the edge of the Sunny, pulled out his saber, and looked at Zoro cautiously. In response, Zoro frowned secretly, took down the word Hidao in his mouth, and said calmly, I don't cut women. After saying that, he turned around and walked towards the Smoker on the bow. Hey, you seem to have forgotten me. With a sneer, Akainu stepped on the stone guardrail on the bow with his right foot, his left arm turned into a giant lava fist, and the terrifying high temperature and thick smoke spread out to the surroundings. For a time, everyone only felt that the violent and hot breath rushed towards them, suppressing them in place. Damn, is this the enemy Luffy faced back then? Sanji clenched his teeth, not daring to relax. Nami, who fell behind him, lowered her head and pursed her lips. After struggling for a while, she slowly stood up from the ground. I can fight too. Nami's tone trembled. Nami, looking at Nami's shaky body, a hint of shock flashed in Chopper's eyes. Although Sanji didn't look back, he could definitely feel the will of the person behind him. I will never let my partner fight a powerful enemy alone. Nami pursed her pale lips, trying to suppress the fear in her heart, and aiming the weather stick at Akainu aloof. Although people don't say it. But 2 years ago, Luffy went to Marine headquarters alone and was forced to fight countless Marine powerhouses, leaving an indelible trace in their hearts. In order not to let the captain of the family carry the enemy alone, in order not to separate. What if you were Marine Admiral? We're still going to kick you out. At this moment, a lazy voice entered the ears of everyone. Ah, what a coincidence, we meet again. Hearing the sound, everyone turned their heads in unison and looked at the bald man on the 3rd floor. I saw a white bath towel wrapped around his waist, a cup of steaming black tea in his hand, and he was looking at Akainu calmly. Looking at the calm Chenmu, Nami and the others were all startled, and they couldn't help thinking of the Dragon Palace City, Chenmu's record against Admiral Fujitora. Yes, the uncle can fight against Admiral. Although the battle ended in a draw, there was no defeat in the end. Thinking of this, Nami's frowning brows loosened and she smiled. Trotted briskly all the way, ran behind Chenmu, pouted pitifully, pointed at Akainu with fierce eyes and said. Uncle look at that Marine, he just planned to sink the Sunny and let us sink into the sea. Chenmu raised his eyebrows, looked at Nami, who was holding his arm tightly, with a strange expression, and said with some amusing, did he really say that? Yeah, Nami nodded vigorously. Then he wrinkled his little nose, pointed at Akainu's smoky left arm and said, look at the constantly dripping lava, if it drips on the Sunny, wouldn't it be a big crater? Thinking that Chenmu didn't get the point, he hurriedly added, the maintenance fee for the Sunny is very expensive. I don't have much money. At the end, the voice is getting smaller and smaller, it seems. Guilty. Hearing this, Chenmu couldn't help shaking his head and smiled bitterly, thinking. You don't have any money yet. Just this month, the Bailey you smashed out of me back and forth will not be less than 30 million. Of course, I thought about this in my heart, and it was impossible to say it. No way, men who have been single for a long time are basically soft-hearted towards meeting girls. Naturally, Chenmu was not exempt from the vulgarity. Thinking that he had been lonely and widowed for so many years, Chenmu laughed at Isho, turned his head, and said softly to the poor Nami, I'll go talk to him. Let's talk. That, he put down the delicate teacup in his hand, raised his eyebrows at Akainu in the distance, bent his feet and charged up, and made a gesture of jumping over. However, Akainu, who was familiar with this person's horror, did not give Chenmu time to act, and said directly. HMPH, I'll let you go this time. Then, glanced at Smoker who was still in a daze, and said coldly. Retreat, go back to headquarters. Waiting for Smoker and Tashigi to react, he turned around and left, disappearing into the bow of the boat. Seeing this, Tashigi frowned slightly, looked at Smoker on the bow, and hesitated, then we. Smoker glanced at everyone coldly, his tone was calm, and he said. Retreat and obey orders. After all, the thick smoke flew directly onto the warship. Tashigi frowned slightly, glanced at Zoro hesitantly, then bit his lip hard, jumped softly, and chased after him. As the two left, the fleet of warships surrounding the Straw Hats also slowly dispersed, heading into the distance. Immediately, the tension on the ship dissipated. Chapter 60 Toolman Xiaochen is online again. After Marine left. A blue shark submarine surfaced, dragging a heavy iron fishing net full of blue stone handcuffs by its tail. As the gates of dock number 3 opened, the blue shark submarine drove in and docked. When the Shark 3 came to a complete stop. With a bang, the round hatch above the submarine was pushed open by a pair of strong blue arms, and Jinbei with a ferocious face slowly showed his head from the entrance. This entrance is really too crowded, the old man has to go to the rear cabin next time. Jinbei put his hands on the submarine and climbed out with difficulty. There is no next time, don't tell me if you have. I will not accompany you to that dangerous deep sea again. Usopp's incomparably disgusting voice came from inside the submarine. He never wanted to see those fierce sea kings dangling before his eyes again. Even though he was ashore now, he was still in shock. When Jinbei dawdled out of the entrance, Luffy jumped out with an excited laugh, followed by Usopp. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect this guy, Frankie, to even prepare coral bubbles. It's really unexpectedly reliable. Luffy, who had a good time in the deep sea, had his hands on his hips, laughing non-stop. On the other hand, Usopp patted his chest with lingering fears, looking like he was the rest of his life. Finally, come back safely. Seeing this, Luffy patted Usopp on the shoulder pretending to be mature, nodded to him, and then strode forward. He walked, he waved his hand and said, I'm a little hungry. I'll go up and pick some oranges. Looking at Luffy's retreating back, Usopp always had an indescribable strangeness. He couldn't figure out the key point, so he shook his head helplessly and followed. After a while, the trio of part-time workers who returned from the deep sea gathered with everyone in the ammunition arsenal, on the negative floor. The crowd formed a group, looking at the pile of seastone handcuffs on the ground, lost in thought. If they are all handcuffed, it won't sell for much money. No, I have to find a way to process it. This is Nami. This stone is much harder than iron. If it can be processed, I can definitely improve the General Frankie again. Frankie. With these stones, my 10,000 T sledgehammer is the real #1 in the world. Even if Marine Admiral comes, I won't forget it. Let's change the target. This is Usopp. As far as the current situation is concerned, only these 3 people are interested in this pile of seastone handcuffs. And the 4 Luffys who are capable people, except Robin, all slumped on the pile of stones with their eyes white. I can't use my strength at all. Luffy stuck out his tongue and said vaguely. Yeah, I'm out of strength. If Robin-chan could show me panty. Brook lay on Luffy's right side and stretched out his sinful hand towards Robin. Robin moved to the side without changing his face. Am I going to die, doctor? Where's the doctor? Chopper lay on Luffy's left side with his arms raised. His expression was very cute. Then he took a deep breath and straightened his chubby belly. He said firmly. I'm the doctor. Then, rolling his eyes, he fainted completely. Seastones salvaged. The piled hills are almost 2 meters high and cover an area of 5 meters. Luffy, who were unconscious on the side of the hill, happened to be in the blind spot of Nami and the others, except for Robin. Fortunately, Big Sister Robin didn't ignore them completely, and when Chopper fell into a coma, she gently hugged him. And Luffy broke in too, but they don't have this treatment. The second flower blooms. Robin whispered, and two tender white arms grew on the ground. They held Luffy's and Brook's ankles respectively, and then flicked. With 2 clicks, the two of them were thrown to the wall and slowly slid down against the wall. Several people in deep thought did not notice this weird sound. They all look like thinkers, thinking about how to maximize the value of this pile of rare materials. On the lawn deck, 2 figures were coming and going, and they were having a lot of fun. Green-headed bastard, you must be doing it on purpose. Sanji, who was in the air, stepped towards Zoro with a full of anger. The lecherous Kappa always says things that people don't understand. Zoro closed his eyes and looked unconcerned, answering Sanji's roar while digging out his ears. Then he dodged sideways, dodging Sanji's volley. Then, with a click, there was a slight cracking sound on the floor, and the broken grass was also shaken into the air. Zoro Vivi was startled and thought, is this guy for real? Zoro, who looked surprised, Sanji couldn't help but shout again. You stupid swordsman, scolding me in front of Nami and Robin, I fought with you. Having said that, Sanji stood on his left foot, kicked his right foot horizontally, and kicked Zoro straight in front of Zoro with a howling wind. And Zoro didn't bother to explain, so he directly took out the black knife and chose to be hard on the front. The two of you came and went, and the offensive got worse and worse, until at the end, it turned into one black and one green, with 2 afterimages. Just as the two were frantically fighting, Chen Mu slowly pushed out the door and appeared in the corridor on the 2nd floor. Holding the saucer in one hand and holding the handle of the teacup in the other, he drank leisurely. Don't say it, Sanji's craftsmanship is really not bad. Chen Mu nodded with satisfaction and took a sip. Then go on to the show. Just when Chen Mu watched with interest, Nami and the others appeared at the corner of the corridor on the 2nd floor. Chen Mu was taken aback for a moment, then turned to look at Nami. The sea-stone handcuffs in her hands. Raising his eyebrows slightly, he said in surprise, I found it so quickly. Seeing Chen Mu speak, Nami showed her beauty issue, nodded lightly, and asked softly. Uncle must know sea-stone very well, right? After all, those watery eyes stared at Chen Mu's Kurome without blinking. It seems that staring into his eyes can see if he is lying. Chen Mu scratched his head, looked at Nami with a little doubt, and replied, well, I understand a little bit, why are you asking this all of a sudden? That's fine, I believe Uncle. Nami smiled. Then he grabbed a sea-stone handcuff with his left hand and pressed it against his right wrist. With a click, he directly handcuffed it, then repeated his right hand, and with a click, again, handcuffed his left hand as well. Chen Mu was taken aback by Nami's sudden act of coquettishness. What are you doing? Nami pursed her lips, pretending to be a whore, and said timidly, Uncle. They brought back a lot of sea stones, but they are all useless handcuffs, so I think. Chen Mu seemed to have guessed something, blinked and pretended not to understand. Seeing Chen Mu pretending not to know, Nami glanced at him angrily, bit her lower lip, and said with some resentment, so I want Uncle to see if I can transform this stone. So you put this thing in your hands. Chen Mu's mouth twitched, not knowing how to complain about the silly girl in front of him. Tilda, Nami pursed her lips and murmured softly. Chen Mu's facial muscles twitched, and black lines hung on his forehead. My dear, the hardness of this broken stone is comparable to that of a diamond. You don't ask me in advance if I can open it, but just put it on yourself. What a brainless. Vivi complained for a while. Chen Mu calmed down, and looked at Nami's chest. The hands that were tied to her chest. Handcuffs. Beautiful. Wait a minute, why does this look familiar to me? Chen Mu couldn't help but complain to himself. Chen Mu, who knew that he was about to think wrongly, hurriedly shook his head and threw the strange thoughts out of his mind. then pretended to be deep. Let me try it first. After saying that, he put down the teacup with his right hand, and then bent his 5 fingers into claws, aiming at Nami's chest. The handcuffs on his chest, and stretched it straight out. At this moment, the flow of time became very slow. Nami just stared at the sinful wolf claw so stupidly, and stretched it out to her chest. Clap. Fortunately, Chen Emu's will was firm, and he caught Seastone's handcuffs accurately, and he could not help but secretly breathe a sigh of relief. Saved my poor little wallet again. Okay, I'll try it now, but I can't guarantee that it can be opened. After all, the hardness of this sea stone is comparable to that of a drill. Before he could finish speaking, he heard a click. Chen Mu was startled, his eyes widened, and he looked at the handcuffs on Nami's wrist. I rely on this thing, is it so fragile? Nami's beautiful eyes lit up, and she looked at Chen Mu with a hint of greed. That's right, it's greed. Looking at Nami who was staring at him, Chen Mu couldn't help but take a half step back. What do you want? Uncle I just want you to do a little favor. Nami gave Chen Mu a wink, her tone full of feminine and pretentious. Chen Mu subconsciously swallowed his saliva and took another half step back. You're not going to crush these sea stones. Immediately, he questioned again, if these stones are broken, wouldn't they be even less valuable? Nami said to Chen Emu's charming Isho, Uncle gently squeezed this stone as hard as a diamond and shattered it. Uncle, if you control it a little bit, won't you be able to squeeze out the desired shape? Without waiting for Chen Mu to speak, Nami said softly again, if it's an uncle, it's definitely possible. Chen Mu twitched the corners of his mouth and said hesitantly, crush it. I can do it, but it seems a little difficult to shape it. Even if it's an uncle. Nami looked at Chen Mu with hope. Okay, of course I can. I'm very good. This is the most important dignity of a man and must not be lost. Although Nami may not understand the connotation, Chen Mu will never allow himself to bow his head first. Seeing Chen Mu who was suddenly in high spirits, Nami's expression froze, and then quickly changed back to a smile. Vivi leaned forward and whispered, Uncle, sea stone's most valuable shape is a bullet. After finishing speaking, without waiting for Chen Mu to react, Nami turned around directly, with her hands behind her back, and jumped away. Bullet. Chen Mu Vivi was stunned for a moment, and then, he suddenly remembered the prop that had been dusted by him for a long time. I think I still have some stock.